I'd like to call to order the Education Committee meeting for July 12th, 2022. First order of business is the approval of the minutes. Recommended action: approval of the June 14th, 2022 Education Committee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Did Mary second? Did we get a second down there?
Second, yeah.
Okay. Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Agenda items. A, supplemental math resource algebra by example. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the purchase of algebra by example teacher and student workbooks for the use in the Keystone remediation classes in the 2022-2023 school year at the cost of $3,061.63 as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. B, supplemental math intervention, spring math. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the purchase of spring math, a supplemental math intervention for students in grades 1 to 7 in the 2022, 2023, 2023, 2024, and 2024-2025 school years at a total cost of $81,930, billed annually as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Supplemental, C, supplemental ELA resource, Common Lit 360. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the purchase of Common Lit 360 for use in the 2022-2023 and the 2023-2024 school years at Coatesville Area Intermediate High School and Coatesville Area Senior High School at a total cost of $12,000 as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
And yes. D, ATSI plans for 2022-2023. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the ATSI plans for Rainbow, Reeseville, North Brandywine, and Coatesville Area Senior High School for the 2022-2023 school year as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
And yes. E, Fun Flicks Rental, one district, one book. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the movie screen rental from Fun Flicks in the amount of $1,208.60 for the use at the One District, One Book culminating movie night event as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
And yes. F, Speech Therapy Field Experience. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the Speech Therapy Field Experience placement as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. G, out-of-state field request for the Air Force Junior ROTC. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the out-of-state field trip request for the Air Force Junior ROTC as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. H, out-of-state field trip request, Air Force Junior ROTC. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the out-of-state field trip request for Air Force Junior ROTC as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
And yes. I, out-of-state field trip request, Air Force Junior ROTC. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the out-of-state field trip request for the Air Force Junior ROTC as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
And yes. J, Social Work Program Affiliation Agreement, LaSalle University. Recommended action, pending legal review, that the Board of School Directors approve the affiliation agreement with LaSalle University which outlines the expectations for educational experiences for university students completing social work program internships as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Social Work Program Affiliation Agreement, Westchester University. Recommended action, pending legal review, that the Board of School Directors approve the affiliation agreement with Westchester University, which outlines the expectations for educational experiences for university students completing social work program internships as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. L, Special Education Plan. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the Special Education Plan as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
And yes. M, Student Services Plan. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the Student Services Plan as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
And yes.
Yes.
N, approval of the Elementary and Secondary Code of Conduct Progressive Discipline Matrix. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors reviews and approves the Elementary and Secondary Code of Conduct Progressive Discipline Matrix as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
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 Ms. Mills, if I could just say a few words on that.
Sure.
So far, Ms. George has been working with some parents and staff to do some context and conventions, types of corrections to the document. We will be meeting with parents on the 14th and 20th of July to review this discipline matrix. Both of those meetings will take place here in the Cash Auditorium at 7 p.m. We'll be talking with the community about the discipline matrix and the Elementary and Secondary Code of Conduct, which is embedded in that matrix. And then we plan to come back on the 26th of July to the board meeting with a presentation. There might be some recommendations for some minor changes, but after we get a year of putting in some restorative practices, we are going to be looking at doing an overhaul with our Elementary and Secondary Code of Conduct, and we'll be coming back to the board next spring with some major changes to that, so it will reflect what we're going to be trying to do with restorative practices. But again, we'll be coming back to the board because every year we have to approve our student code of conduct prior to the start of school. So we'll be doing a special presentation and asking for board approval on July 26th. If there is something that is an issue that we need to fix, then that still gives us to the special board meeting in August prior to school starting to approve the code of conduct. Thank you.
Thank you. Item O, proposed adjudication. Student 10008505. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the proposed student adjudication for student 10008505 as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. There are no informational items this evening. No old business, no new business, and public comment. Lori Shannon Bailey.
Good evening. I wanted to just express appreciation for having been given the opportunity to participate in the Special Education Planning Committee. It was very interesting. It was intense. I have some concerns. However, I won't get into those right now. I think one of the areas that I'm most interested in participating in is the trauma-informed initiative. Looking forward to looking at how we can help this community and work with students who are having difficulties and working with the board to lessen the adjudications and focus more on children who need help and families who perhaps may not recognize the need for help. But as I've said to you all at every board meeting, adjudication is not the only answer. And when we become a board which focuses on more of a student-centered district and a trauma-informed district, you will understand why I say that. I also wanted to compliment you all on the social work intern initiatives. I know that that was announced earlier this year. I did get an email earlier this year from at least 2 board members indicating that that was something that you all were working on. So that too will work towards an effort that will decrease the number of students that will be adjudicated. And so again, I want to thank you for those efforts. I'm sure I've sounded like a broken record, but when we care about this community, when we are standing here, when I'm standing here, pouring out my heart, letting you know that I care about kids deeply, this is what happens. So I wanted to thank you for those efforts and to let you know that I recognize that. Thank you.
Thank you. Carmen Jacks?
Hello, everybody. My name is Carmen Jacks, and I'm here on behalf of my great-nephew, Samir Jackson. Samir Jackson has been out of school since April the 8th. He was supposed to start summer school yesterday. They sent him home and said he wasn't registered. He was registered. Okay, this problem is he had a fight. He got suspended 5 days. He got another 5 days. Then he had a hearing, an informal hearing. Then he had a formal hearing. They didn't have all the information at this formal hearing. They didn't have the whole video. They had a partial video of what happened. This boy has been out of school, like I said, since April the 8th. That other kid, not trying to get another kid in trouble, but he actually got walked home. Then he got a ride. They picked him up. Somebody picked him up and took him home, told the parent that, oh, well, we think you should take him to the hospital. Said there was blood all over the cafeteria. That Samir started this. Samir did not start this. The video was the proof that Samir did not start it. Okay, we went through all that. It's a little longer story, but we went through all that. And to have him sent home from school yesterday for summer school, he needs 2 credits to go to the 10th grade. I'm very disappointed in Coastville Area School District how they treated my great-nephew. When there's a fight between 2 people should be, when you got punished, suspended, whatever, but to take this to the level that has been taken to is unfair to Samir, and it's unfair to his whole family to have to be going through this. We had to get a lawyer to come in and handle this. Money that nobody has to spend, but we did. You know, I don't think it's fair that he was the only one who got a punishment when there was 2 people fighting and he wasn't the kid who started it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Our next meeting is Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. I adjourn the Education Committee meeting at 6:13.
or Mike, is Mr. Roan and Ms. Shout on the agenda? Or are they on the stream? Okay, thank you. Can you just give us a high sign when Mr. Roan joins? Thank you.
I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting. First order of business is the approval of minutes. Recommended action, the approval of the June 14, 2022 Finance Committee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Ms. Shout, can you hear us?
Did we lose her?
If we could, Mr. Fisher, in absence of communication with Ms. Shout, would you mind stepping in?
Will do.
Wait,
Thank you.
she just fixed her mic. Jen?
Yes, second. Can you guys hear me?
Thank you. And we'll call for a vote.
Yes?
Ms. Shout, we're calling for a vote. If we could just have Mr. Fisher sub in due to the communication error.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. First order on the agenda is financial statements. Recommended action at the Board of School Directors approve the financial statements, bills, payables list as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? See none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes?
just have Mr.
Yes.
sub in due to the Yes. Letter B, senior award donations. Recommended action at the Board of School Directors ratify the donations received from various individuals, groups, or agencies for senior awards as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Just a big thank you to that large number of people who help our senior class out every year.
And we'll call for a vote.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Letter C, Life Touch National School Studios commission checks. Recommended action at the Board of School Directors approve the commission check from Life Touch National School Studios for a total of $301.62 to East Fallowfield Elementary School for the 2021 Spring School Pictures as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Letter D, creation of payroll specialist position in the business department. Recommended action at the Board of School Directors approve the creation of one payroll specialist position to support the restructuring of payroll duties within the business department for the Coatesville Area School District as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Letter E, creation of accounts payable specialist in the business department. Recommended action at the Board of School Directors approve the creation of one accounts payable position, specialist position to support the restructuring of account payables duties within the business department for the Coastal Area School District as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Since we've gotten through, it looks like both of the business agenda items prior to a vote to this one. Dr. Dunlap, could you weigh in just a little bit and talk about some of the administrative analysis within our departments that we're kind of going through right now?
So we're in the process of doing a little bit of reorganizing. There's been a number of staff members, for example, in the business department, it was a team of 10, which has been reduced to 5 positions. And what we're doing is taking the various different duties of those positions and amalgamating them into those 5 positions. We're doing something similar with IT. We're also doing some things in the pupil services department as well. So there are 3 major areas where we're doing a little bit of restructuring. That's what you're seeing here. And over the course of the next month or so, you'll probably see some more changes. Just with the workforce that is in today's economy, there are a number of positions that we just aren't able to fill. And so we're doing this to be proactive.
Thank you. And it's fair and accurate to say that these are not headcount increases. These are existing
Correct.
positions.
Correct. These are not headcount
Thank you.
increases.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Letter F, creation of district security officer for the Coatesville Area School District. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the creation of one district security officer position to support the security of the Coatesville Area School District as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
That security position is one that we had mentioned in our meetings with the parents, and you'll also see climate coaches on tonight's agenda, as well as 2 other police officers.
Thank you, Dr. Dunlap. To my colleagues, any questions? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Letter G, creation of climate coach positions for the Coatesville Area School District. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the creation of 4 to 6 climate coach positions to support the students of the Coatesville Area School District as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Letter H, creation of an additional attendance secretary position for the Coatesville Intermediate High School. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the creation of 1 additional attendance security secretary position to support Coatesville Intermediate High School as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Dr. Dunlap, does that take us to a total of 2?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, at the intermediate, no, where it was a shared position there where they were doing work in guidance and work in the attendance office. This will become full-time attendance. This is in our work with the Teamsters Association as part of us trying to restructure and move staff around. This is going to be a position through Teamsters that is going to be shifted there for full-time attendance secretary.
So it's correct to say we will once again have 2 full-time attendance secretaries, like we've had for many years?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Letter I, creation of 2 additional police officer positions for the Coatesville Area School District. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the creation of 2 additional police officer positions to support the Coatesville Area School District as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Letter J, creation of Pbis building lead. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the 9 Pbis building leads to implement and oversee the Pbis program in the Coatesville Area School District. There will be 1 lead per school and will be paid through Title I funding. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Dr. Dunlap, I think that pretty much explains the position in terms of funding. Can you speak a little bit about what the Pbis building lead will be responsible for?
So normally in each district, you have someone who coordinates the PBIS program in the district as well as in each building. This is a new position that is an extra duty position for current staff members. They will receive some training through the Chester County Intermediate Unit, in addition to the PBIS training that they are currently receiving. And they will coordinate PBIS in each building, and then they will report to Mr. Pbis. This is going to be funded through Title. Normally when we do something like this, we do it through credits with the contract, but it's a way for us to offer the staff a little bit more funding, or I should say salary out of Title funds to have them participate in that. But it is 1 staff member to coordinate and work with their building principals as well as Mr. Pbis and Ms. George throughout the district. So there'll be 9 positions.
Thank you. To my colleagues, any questions or comments?
Mr. Finkbonner, I have a question. Since this is being funded by Title I funds, is there a need to have to, because it's going to be a teacher, a current teacher, is there going to be a need to have have some negotiation with CATA as far as what that salary is going to be? Does it need to be a determined salary based on negotiations with them?
I can answer. We are actually having a discussion with the association on Thursday afternoon.
Okay.
About this.
Okay.
I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding because it's supposed to be tied to units. What I don't think the association understands is that it's a chance for the teachers to have a little higher boost in that pay of that, because it's permissible to use Title funds to support this.
Okay, great, thank you.
If no other comments or questions, we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Letter K, Human Resources Report. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the resignations, appointments, new positions, leave of absence, transfers, change of status, and corrections as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Letter L, Human Resources Report Addendum. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the resignations, appointments, new positions, leave of absence, transfers, change of status, and corrections as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We don't have any informational items. Any old business? Any new business? It looks like we do have one public comment, and that is Lori Shannon Bailey.
Excuse me, Ms. Shannon Bailey, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to ask Mr. Finkbeiner a quick question. I saw a few members of the community come in late. Are they able to still sign up for public comment?
Typically, the sign-up is taken at the start of the meeting, so that they're collected, but if we do have any additionals that would like to comment on finance, you can go after Lori Shannon Bailey. I just ask that you please state your name, and then I'll give you the form at the end, and you can sign it.
Okay.
Mr. Finkbeiner, this might be as good a time as any to have this discussion. There are not many people here tonight. But actually, Dr. Dunlap and I have had some previous discussion. And as a board, we are actually not following our policy for public comments at a board meeting. So obviously, we don't want to spring this on people. We want people to be able to know. But our policy does state that should be signed up before the business meeting starts. It would be unfair to just spring that out there and start that immediately. So, Dr. Dunlap, I would ask as we move forward, when we make this change, that you somehow make it very well known to everyone. And if I'm misspeaking, please correct me.
No, you're right. You're right on. We have, over the last couple meetings, allowed people to sign up and speak. But as we start the school year of staying within our policy, the way that the policy reads is that anyone signing up for comments would have to be finished signing up 5 minutes before the meeting starts each evening for both comments on the agenda and comments at the end, whether it's for a committee meeting, special board meeting, or board meeting. So we'll make sure we get that information out to the public so that we're ready to go with that as we start school.
Right,
You know-
and I don't say that just for tonight, because nobody would understand that, but it was just a good segue into beginning to have some public comment about that. Again, I've been a proponent all along to say, why have policies if we're not going to follow us, and follow them, and guilty as charged. We've been more than lenient in an effort to try to allow people to speak at board meetings, but again, I think it's appropriate for the board to begin to follow that policy as it's written.
No, thank you. I appreciate the clarification on that.
So I have a suggestion or a thought. It would be useful on that big screen just to say that message.
And again, I'll repeat myself again. I am by no means springing that out there tonight. I think your comment is well taken, but again, we need to make sure that people are aware, and I would think that the beginning of the new school year would be a good time for us to begin to adhere to that policy.
I agree.
Thank you, President Fisher. So, Lori, we'll start with you. If there's anyone else that wishes, we'll allow a sign up. If you signed up late, like I said, you'll just follow Ms. Shannon Bailey and then just state your name, and we'll give you the form for a sign up. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to have this dialogue. At the last meeting, it was just kind of sprung on us. The papers were just taken up there, and we are taxpayers, and I would like to say that we are stakeholders, and we all know the value of communication. And some of us have a hard time communicating with you all anyway. Some of us don't get the value of emails. Some of us don't get the value of phone calls being returned. And so when we have an opportunity to communicate with you, whether it's here or in the grocery store or wherever it is, it's important. Again, we are stakeholders. We are taxpayers. And it's important that we have this collaboration.
Ms. Shannon Bailey, I think, again, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. We value those comments, but we also have a policy, and we should be following that policy.
Mr.
Okay,
Fisher, I get
we're not
you.
doing it. We're not doing it so that people cannot speak. That is not our intention at all. We just need to start following the policy that we have.
By virtue of the fact that you said you would start to implement it at the beginning of the school year proves what you're saying. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And you've been very good in terms of helping to get information for me that I've asked, and I've asked a lot of questions. So let me be clear in saying that. And so I wanted to just I wanted to identify the fact that there are 8 teachers resigning from the district on the HR report. Are you all concerned about that? I hope you are. 8 teachers, that's a lot of teachers. And I believe that if we are counting from the HR reports from the entire year, I think we've surpassed about 30 teachers. That's a lot of teachers. That's a lot of teachers that have invested time and effort into our students. And so as you negotiate a new union contract, please be thinking about the salary. I read somewhere, and I think I shared on social media, that our teachers are the lowest paid in Chester County. I hope that's not true, but I think it is. We're the wealthiest county in the state. You know, please do what you can to help us retain teachers. Without teachers, we're really not anything. And without good, solid, dedicated teachers, our students are not gonna learn. So please, let's not have this teacher turnover that we are experiencing this coming school year. And please also, let's do what we can not to have so much money, taxpayer money, spent in legal fees. Thank you very much.
Was there anybody else who wished to speak for Finance Committee? It's in the next one? Okay. Okay. So seeing no additional public comments, our next meeting will be Tuesday, August 9th, 2022, and I'll call for adjournment of the Finance Committee at 6:34 p.m.
I'd like to call to order the Policy Committee meeting. First order of business is approval of the minutes. Recommended action is approval of the June 14th, 2022 Policy Committee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Let's call for the vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. There's no presentations. Moving on to agenda items. Letter A, Policy 150, Title I, Comparability of Services. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors review and approve the Policy 150, Title I, Comparability of Services as presented, and if approved, to move forward that the agenda item be placed on the agenda of the July 12th, 2022 special board meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, let's call for the vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And yes. Letter B, Policy 246, School Wellness. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors review and approve the Policy 246, Student Wellness as presented, and if approved, to move forward that the agenda item be placed on the agenda of the July 12th, 2022 special board meeting. Can I call for motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or concerns?
Just a couple discussion points. These 3 policies that we're seeing tonight are annual policies that have to be reviewed and approved by the board under school code. The first policy that we talked about, there were no changes. This policy here on wellness alludes to what Mr. Fisher was saying, that we need to follow our policies. There are a number of things in here that we need to do a better job as a district of following. But one of the new pieces to the school wellness policy is a different council that is a little different than the Wellness Committee. And you will see that listed in the policy. And this council can be established by the superintendent to study student health issues and assist in organizing programs to support students and staff. So this Advisory Health Council is new, and it's something we're going to have to start this year.
Thank you. Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes. And yes. Letter C, Policy 249, Bullying, Cyberbullying. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors review and approve the Policy 150, Bullying, Cyberbullying as, that should be 249, sorry. That the Board of School Directors review and approve the Policy 249, Bullying, Cyberbullying as presented, and if approved, to move forward that the agenda item be placed on the agenda of July 12th, 2022 special board meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any comments or questions?
It's just an annual review. There are no changes for this policy.
Thank you. Call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And moving on, there's informational items. There's no old business or new business. Public comment, Lori Shannon Bailey.
While Ms. Bailey's coming to the mic, all 10 of those administrative regulations are centered on the wellness policy. We're going to be discussing those with our administrative teams, and our administrative teams in each of the buildings are going to have to make sure that they assist in communicating those administrative regulations to the public and the parents.
All right, thank you.
Good evening. I just wanted to say about the bullying policy. That's probably one of the most critical policies that you all have. Certainly, it's one that should be implemented. I'm aware that the adjudication tonight is connected to a bullying situation. I believe the mom who brought a knife on campus in February, it's my understanding that she called the office wanting to know or wanting to communicate that her child was going to be attacked. It's my understanding that no one answered the phone, and so she was concerned about a bullying situation. So please make sure, if you can, do what you can to make sure bullying is addressed aggressively as we move forward. Bullying is, we all know it's a major problem throughout the district. And I would say, please do everything that you can to make sure that our students are protected. We hear about it. We hear that teachers try to do something about it, but we also know that it's a major problem. And I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not being accusatory. It's a major problem, and I would ask that we be mindful of that and to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to keep this a safe school environment. Thank you.
Lear Nyako.
This is not on the agenda, but it has to do with policy. So I like that we want to follow the rules. That's great. But can we maybe take a look at especially committee meetings, because that's when you guys discuss things, and sometimes I'm not always gonna have a question until after I've heard you all discuss something. So then we're more part of that discussion, and we might be thinking of something that you're not. I think that's why they stayed up here for the last 4 years. So it's literally just changed. But I am glad that we are. And is there another policy that's not part of meetings that describes public comment?
So where you'll find?
Because I'm on.
So where you have to look for that is you have to go to the board operating guidelines, which are your 000s.
Right, that's where I'm
at. And in
at.
your 000s, look at 003 functions. I'd have to go into it and look at it in more detail.
Because under meetings, it doesn't really say that it just says prohibited by law and before board action.
Yes, so.
I was just
Yeah,
clarifying.
I'll go back and look at that, but I know that that's how it was written.
Yeah.
About like 5 minutes before the meeting starts, that's where that was located.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll keep looking too. But if
Yep.
we could maybe just.
And I'll bring
consider-
something back to the board before September about committee meetings.
I'll follow up with an email. Thank you.
You bet.
Does anyone else have any public comment for? No. Okay. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, August 9th, 2022, and I'd like to call for adjournment of the policy meeting at 6:41.
Mr. Sobczak, is Mr. Roan on? He is not?
All right, so in Mr. Roan's absence, I'll ask Mr. Fisher if you don't mind pinch hitting. First order is to call to order the Operations Committee meeting, and the first order of business is the approval of the minutes. Recommended action, the approval of the June 14, 2022 Operations Committee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
And we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. First up, we do have a presentation, the much-anticipated Master Facilities Plan.
So, Mr. Finkbonder, if I could, I'd like to introduce here with us tonight from Schrader Group Architecture is Mr. David Schrader and Danielle Hoffer, and also from ICS Consulting Incorporated, Mr. Phil Solomon. I did send a message out on Sunday night to the community, just trying to give the community a heads up to tonight's presentation. For those of you that are in the audience, back on this row back here in this left-hand side of the auditorium, there are two documents, agendas, and a PowerPoint presentation. Those of you in the audience can have a copy of that presentation to follow. The board will be looking at a little different presentation. The board will be looking at a detail of each of the layouts of the building, the floor plans, as well as aerial photos. We are not permitted to show those publicly. On the slides that you have in your handout in the audience, it will explain what is being explained to the board minus those aerial photos and those floor plans. But you will be able to hear as the presentation goes forward what we will be discussing. Tonight, as we go through this, instead of the public viewing the screen behind us, they will actually be following a blown-up version of the PowerPoint that the audience has on their screens as they're watching this, so it will be legible for those that are participating in the meeting electronically. They'll be able to review these slides as well. Tonight, our board will be discussing the development as well of a community task force to examine our facilities. The age and condition of our school buildings is something that the Pennsylvania Department of Education requires every brick and mortar school district to examine periodically. As I said in the letter, this is only the beginning of this process, and we will ensure parents, staff, and community members that they are going to be deeply involved in this process. Now, there are three primary issues that have caused us to closely examine how we're using our facilities and what decisions we'll need to make for the future: shifting enrollments, aging facilities, and financial challenges. Back in October of 2021, the Coatesville Area School District contracted with ICS and the Schrader Group, two leading facility architectural and consulting companies widely used by schools regionally and nationally, to professionally evaluate their facilities. In this presentation tonight, they have considered factors such as the most economic ways to restructure our facilities. This presentation will include renovations required to meet changing enrollments and educational needs, as well as the life and health of each building. Over the last 6 months, Coatesville Area School District administrators have been meeting with ICS and the Schrader Group, which often work in tandem to discuss facilities, opportunities, and challenges in a wide range of factors. Tonight, these companies, along with the Coatesville Area School District, will provide an overview of these assessments and potential solutions. Some of these include renovations, closing some of our buildings, and reconfiguring some of our enrollment boundaries. I want to stress again that no decisions have been made. This is just the beginning of what will be a very public process that will take course over this upcoming school year to consider these options, make decisions, and make recommendations back to the Coatesville Area School District School Board to impact the future of this school district. It's important to note that while charter school enrollment has been one of our biggest challenges over the last decade, we have made and are continuing to make important academic improvements. This past year, for the first time in 6 years, we saw an increase in overall enrollment in our district. While forecasts still indicate a downward trend, we are optimistic that as we continue to make gains, we will attract students back from charter schools. As I said, this team has really spent the last 10 weeks putting this information together. Between the Schrader Group and ICS and our district administrators, we have walked every building. We have linked the goals of our comprehensive plan to this master facilities plan. We have reviewed, this is important to note, as you see tonight's presentation, we have reviewed each program and forecasted out 2 years what those needs of the district will be. They are the numbers being presented in tonight's board presentation. I want to repeat, these options range from closing buildings and selling property to building additions to support a wide variety of clustering grades together to make up elementary schools and various secondary schools. It includes redistricting and building completely new schools. We have compiled this information to present to the board in public tonight. We would like to form a master facilities plan community task force, and the makeup of this task force will include the following: 1 board member, 2 district administrators, 1 secondary administrator, 1 elementary administrator, 4 secondary teachers, 5 elementary teachers, the PTO presidents or a representative of each PTO organization in each of our schools, 1 CATA representative, 1 CAFE representative, 1 Teamster representative. We would like to get 9 parents, 3 from each region. Now, this is difficult because there may be more than 3 parents from each region that would like to sign up. But what we will do is for those parents that sign up, and we'll be putting that out once the board gives us direction tonight, we will be putting this information out to gather this team, this task force, and we will use a randomizer to select the 3 parents from each region. We will also post that randomizer so people know that we did that appropriately. We're looking to get 2 community members from the Coatesville Education Foundation as part of this task force. And then we'd like to get 7 representatives from community groups that we are affiliated with: CCAP, CYI, Young Men and Women in Charge, the Bridge Academy, and recently we've been meeting with a number of pastors in the community, and we'd like to get 3 pastors that give a wide breadth of our community to be part of this. We'd also like membership from ICS and the Schrader Group to serve as resources for this group of this task force. That is a total of 46 people. Again, the information here tonight will give the Master Facilities Plan Community Task Force a good starting point for discussion with a lot of data that has been worked out over especially these past 10 weeks. We're looking to assemble this task force in September and work through the school year and come back and make some recommendations to the school board sometime in the spring of 2023. We would provide the task force with the support that they need throughout the process. With no further ado, I'd like to turn it over to David and go ahead and start with our presentation. Board members, you have a copy of this presentation in front of you that will enable you to follow along with David, Danielle, and Phil. David?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dunlop. Thank you, members of the board, very much for the opportunity. It is a fairly lengthy presentation, so please bear with us. So ultimately, the presentation is the result of 5 major processes that we were involved with here. And the first happened back in November, December of 2021, where a group from Phil's office, ICS, and a group from our team, architects and engineers, went through the facilities and conducted facility assessments, which ultimately resulted in the cost that you're going to see in the first part of this presentation. At the same time, the second item that was occurring were education facility planners from our group were meeting with district administration and building administration to understand full building usage and to understand how that related to the capacities in those buildings. The third major objective at this point was to have a firm called Sundance Enrollment Projections specialists working from January on to do enrollment projections throughout the district, and there's quite a bit of information behind that. We're presenting just a very small summary of that this evening. The fourth was what Dr. Dunlop has been referencing here, which is the meeting to develop the options that you're going to see, and that was quite a bit of work with a large group of folks. And then ultimately the fifth item is the development of budget estimates around that. And so with those 5 items, we're going to present 3 basic parts of this presentation. The first, the data collection, is going to reference the items related to the facility assessment. At the end, the estimate of probable costs is a development of all of the costs that could potentially be seen based upon the things that Danielle is going to speak about for the vast portion of this presentation. And so I would like you to pay attention very closely to what happens in the very first set of slides and then finally what happens in the estimates, just as a statement of point here. So in the data collection phase, I referenced already the team that had gone through all of the facilities in the district, recognizing at the time that South Brandywine Middle School was offline and Friendship Elementary had been demolished. Those were 2 projects that in prior feasibility studies had been included as buildings and as capacities in the district. And so that's important to know now as part of the presentation, but it's also important to understand how that relates to some of the possible renovation options that come about. When we talk about facility assessments, we're talking about taking the buildings as they stand with the spaces as they stand and getting them up to new functioning capability. And so that means that we look at the envelope of the building and get that up to where it should be in terms of the insulation value, in terms of new windows, in terms of roofs. And then it goes into the interiors, provides new finishes throughout, and then provides new systems throughout each of the buildings. And we were gauging each building based upon the age of each of the systems. And what that does is it starts to divide where you want to attack the system replacements in each of the buildings. The other things that it does include are code and ADA upgrades that come about as buildings start to age and as the new codes come into place. What these do not include are any additions or modifications that might accommodate some of your future educational programs or any kind of growth. And so that, I guess what I would like to say about the first portion of the presentation is this represents the buildings as status quo, but with all new systems and as if they were in new functioning order. But they would be in the same shape and form that you see them today. The third part of the presentation is attacking all of the things that Dr. Dunlop talked about, which is trying to bring capacity to the buildings, new educational programs into the buildings, and so on. And so that's the difference that you'll see in the costing between the 2. So a real quick summary, and this is a very deep portion of the presentation. There's a lot of data that was assembled to get here. We generally look at the buildings in several categories. The first category are the things that need to be done quickly in the buildings, and oftentimes those are systems related, buildings that are starting to see the systems starting to fail, that will eventually need replacement. Those are the items in the red category. And certainly those could be argued as to which ones go in the red and which go in the yellow. We were evaluating from an engineering standpoint what kind of life each of those systems had left in them from an engineering standpoint. The second priority are things that fall into that 6 to 10 year time frame, and finally the 11 plus years are things that we see out there that you should be looking at for the buildings as time goes on. And so if a district is starting to take these priorities and divide and evaluate them, you would start to try to set up some kind of capital program to accommodate the challenges that you see in some of the red categories. And the way that this is stacked in terms of a presentation is we were looking at, from a square footage standpoint, and $dollars to upgrade those per square foot, the buildings that required the most work down to the buildings that required the least work. And I'm sure it comes as no surprise to you, the 4 buildings that are at the bottom of the list that need the least work relative to the buildings at the top in the red that probably need a bit more work. The second part of this presentation includes the rest of your support facilities, including the farmhouse, storage building, the Gordon Education Center, and on as you can see. And there's a summary at the bottom for the priority 1 needs in the district, priority 2 needs, and priority 3. And again, I'm sure that there is certainly an amount of debate that could go into whether something needs to be replaced in the next 5 years or next 10 years. The challenge for the district would be some of the parts of the systems that do start to fail in that 5-year time frame, and you find that you need to do quite a bit of upgrading. So that's kind of the conundrum of one of these engineering studies, is there's a little bit of objectivity to, and subjectivity to some extent, as to where some of those numbers could fall. But it's a fairly large number. It's $100 million worth of priority 1 items that should be evaluated within the district. And then there's a secondary set that fall on that 6 to 10 year range that could add up to an additional $64 million. Those 2 sets of numbers are in today's dollars. And anything that is pushed out, of course, has a level of escalation that goes along with that. So I'm going to stop there. Keep those numbers in mind, and then we'll return to numbers at the end. And I think the middle part of the presentation here is the most interesting portion.
Thank you, David. The second part of the data collection is looking at the enrollment projections. And we look at it with 2 different resources. Typically, when we do a facility evaluation for the district, we use the guidelines provided by the Department of Education, or PDE. And they annually put out projections. The last projections that they did were in April of 2021. And the one thing to note of this is that they're based on cohort survival methodology, and that's looking at children that are born and how they go through the district. They trend each year through the district based on historic births. The one thing it doesn't do is factor in anything to do with any housing starts, any changes in the housing market, or charter school enrollments. So it's always good to look at that in comparison with enrollment projections that are done by a professional. And in this case, the district hired Sundance Associates, and they did an updated projection enrollment in January of this year. And they look at not only that cohort survival methodology, as PDE does, but they also consider housing starts. They also looked at the charter school enrollments and pulled those out of the projections. So those are 2 ways of looking at it, and as we go through this, we'll show you that we use the Sundance projections, which we feel are more reliable. In the end, both of the enrollment projections show a downward trend in enrollments. So this is a graphic representation of what Pennsylvania Department of Education provides for Coatesville Area School District. And what we did is graphically showed the groupings by grade level that currently exist at the school district on the top, and then on the bottom was Sundance projections. And for whatever reason, they had different numbers for the 2021 enrollments, but the result is the same. They're showing about a 900 to 1,000 student decline, grades K to 12 across the district over the next 5 years. PDE also looks at 10-year projections, but we're using the 5-year projections because those are more reliable. If you think about it, the kids haven't even been born after 5 years, so you can't even track the kids if you don't know how many kids are born. So for the purposes of this study, we're going to be using the Sundance projections. This is just a graphic model of showing what the historical data shows in blue, the blue columns, and you can see the progressive decline in the district over the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years. The next portion of the data collection is looking at the building capacity analysis. And Here we again look at two different models. We tailor the first part looking at the current use capacity using the PDE methodology for building capacity. And we met with the principals in the end of last year, each of the principals, and reviewed the plans and how the current rooms are being utilized. The second way we look at enrollment projections is tailoring it to the specific school district and what we call a true building capacity, because we're tailoring it for the school district's program and another policy, the class sizes that the school district has adopted. We're looking at if there's any program adjustments that need to be made within the existing footprint. We're not looking at adding on at this point. We're just trying to figure out what the capacity of the building is in the current configuration. So when you look at adjusting rooms that may be in inadequately sized spaces and need to provide that space in a regular sized classroom, there may be some program adjustments having to do with a loss or a gain of a classroom space, which affects the building capacity. And so this is we use the functional use capacity as our method for planning because it is tailored for your school district. Looking at class sizes, Department of Education recognizes 25 students per classroom for grades K to 12 and 20 for labs. The functional use capacity, again, tailored for Coatesville, we based it on the policy 126, which is the administrative guidelines that support that policy and the recommended class sizes. And what we have listed here is what we've used in the analysis. There's different class sizes for the primary grade levels. The grade 3 is at 26. Intermediate school for intermediate elementary schools is for grades 4 and 5 is 28. And that the secondary levels we use 30 students per classroom. So this is kind of like worst case scenario. The current use capacity using that PDE model, and just giving you a little bit more background on this, and this all play out when we start to model this capacity. But I'm just trying to give you the background for it. Looking at the elementary schools, K to 6, including Scott Elementary School, for the PDE model, capacity is only given to grade level classrooms, grades K to 5. Those are your homerooms. We do not give capacity for those educational support spaces like art, music, and gym. Don't give capacity to that. And PDE doesn't recognize capacity for any special ed classrooms as well as any IU classrooms. So that's not factored into the capacity. At the secondary level, again, I'm still talking about the PDE model. They give capacity for general instruction classrooms and all the other support classrooms, including art, music, family consumer science, tech ed, STEM, and gymnasiums. And you'll see again when I chart this out what that means. And again, saying that special education and modular classrooms do not receive capacity. Modular classrooms, the type that you have at the school district, are considered substandard classrooms, and so it's not permanent construction, so they're not giving capacity for those rooms. The functional use capacity, again, we're tailoring it for Coatesville. We use a similar methodology at the elementary grade levels. And with Scott, the capacity includes other available classroom space. There's additional space in that building that you'll see. At the secondary level, we do a little bit different than what PD recognizes. When we consider middle schools, we look at the team model, and the 7th grade center at Brandywine is operating on the team model. And that's kind of looking at the kids are in their homerooms, and their homerooms in a team include English, math, social studies, and science. So those are the rooms that get capacity, and we don't give capacity to all the other support classrooms in the room. PDE recognizes all those rooms in their capacity model. The 8 to 12 high school configuration for PDE, again, looks at not only the homerooms, but also the other spaces that support it. Modular classrooms don't receive capacity. Special ed classrooms do not receive capacity, and including the self-contained classrooms such as autistic support and life skills. So I might have looked at looking at the building utilization factor, this is the last thing I'm going to try to explain, and I'll get into how this really is represented when we look at capacity. PD recognizes that elementary school should operate at 100% utilization, and we know that's really not realistic. And it's not ideal for planning because you don't want to open a school at 100% capacity. But this is what they use in their planning process. And then they recognize 90% utilization at the secondary level. For planning purposes, again, we don't think that those are realistic numbers, and the school could probably attest to that. So to allow for flexibility and fluctuations in enrollment, any special ed requirements, and any sports spaces that are needed, the following targeted utilizations are used for elementary school at 90% utilization. You see we've derated it by about 10% to give you that cushion. At the middle school level, 85 to 90% utilization, and at the high school, 85 to 90%. So what does that mean? So those people that are on the Zoom call and in the audience notice the one thing that Dr. Dunlap had noticed. For safety and security reasons, we are not presenting or projecting the floor plans, but the board has access to this. And so I'm going to just talk about these particular elements that the board is seeing here, and we'll get back to the regular presentation in a second here. I used the Callan Elementary School as an example of how we figured out the capacity of this school. What you're seeing here is a graphic representation of the floor plan and the rooms that as they are currently being utilized based on the discussion that we had with the principal. If you notice the location of the modular classrooms down in the bottom left-hand corner are not considered for capacity. We did not include that in either the PDE model or the functional model as having capacity because they're substandard classrooms. So the other thing to note here, if you notice, for instance, there's a preschool on the right-hand side of the plan. There's a preschool speech and PT program in what was formerly a toilet room. Actually, that probably was a storage room, but we have some Title I reading no, that was 2 toilet rooms there. So those programs would need to be pulled out into a regular-sized classroom or half of a regular-sized classroom if it was supposed to operate properly. So that's going to adjust the capacity. And you can see we have some programs down in the basement. And in talking to the principal, you know, they have concerns about flooding anytime it rains. So that goes back again to some of the building evaluations that we did in the assessment. In the functional capacity, you can see that we've not included any of the classrooms in the modular classrooms, and we've pulled everything inside the building. We've even pulled programs out of the lower level into this floor plan. And in doing that, we've had a reduction in the amount of classrooms that we can provide for grade level instruction, which directly affects the capacity of the building. So this is to all the things that I just talked about. I'm showing in a graph here of how that is calculated. The column in gray is the PD capacity. The column in red is the Coatesville capacity. And you can see highlighted there that in the PD capacity, we're identifying 3 classrooms to 2 classrooms for the various grade levels. Grade 3 doesn't have any classrooms shown because they're in the modulars. And we're using the PDE capacity at 25 students per classroom. When we do the evaluation and we right-size the classrooms for this building, we're down to 2 classrooms per grade level in the functional use capacity, and we're using your policy for the class sizes. We're not giving capacity for any of the other support spaces, as shown here. The other thing I'll point out is the autistic support classroom in that building. PD doesn't give capacity for that, but it is a self-contained classroom, and those kids are there all day long, so we have capacity for that program in that classroom. And so we look at Callan Elementary School based on the current enrollments, and what I mean by that is we're looking at the current enrollments times the capacity that was developed in that chart. The current operating capacity using the PDE model is 115%. And if you remember back on a couple of previous slides, our targeted utilization for an elementary school is 90%. So what that's telling us is that this building, as it's operating now, is over capacity. If you look at the functional use capacity based on your policies and the capacity that was right-sizing the classrooms, we're at 125% capacity. If you look at the projection enrollments, as I noted before, your enrollments are trending down. There'll be a little bit of relief at Callan Elementary School, but you still have some pressure at that school for enrollments. This was done at each of the schools, both elementary and middle schools and high schools. And so this is a summary of all the information that was pulled together, looking at your current enrollments. The gray columns are looking at the PD model, and you can see that Calne, East Fallowfield, Kings Highway, and Rainbow are all experiencing some capacity issues. If you look at the functional capacity, again, you're still experiencing some issues at Calne, East Fallowfield, and Kings Highway, and then the average is given below for the elementary schools. Scott has sufficient capacity. North Brandywine has some issues, again, with some pressure with capacity using the team model. And then at the secondary campus, you're in good shape. There it goes. And then in the report that was done by Sundance, they also modeled this using this bar graph, which is a nice way to just kind of looking at your grades K to 5, where the functional capacity, and that's what we're looking at, and how that relates to your enrollments historically over the next 5 years and then 10 years out. And then again, that's the average of all your K to 5. And this is looking at your grade level structural that you currently have. So this is Scott at grade 6. You have sufficient capacity in that building. And at grade 7, again, North Brandywine is seeing the pressure. It will tailor off a little bit as you go through the years. At the 8-9 building, you have sufficient capacity there. Again, looking at that functional capacity line in relationship to the bar chart, as well as the 10-12 senior high school. So in summary, Calne, East Fallowfield, and Kings Highway exceed the target of 90%. We're looking again at that functional use capacity. We're okay at Scott. We're okay at the secondary campus, but North Brandywine also exceeds that targeted range of 85 to 90%. And will moderate as projected if the enrollments drop. Okay, so that's all the data collection. That's all the information that we accrued in order to try to figure out what's next. Where do we go with the district? How do we resolve some of the issues with the condition of the facilities, dealing with the programs, dealing with the enrollment projections, and building capacities? So this next phase is looking at master planning options. So when we originally started this, we looked at exploring options to help stabilize the district through facility planning. When we looked at what buildings we should really address, we were looking at probably maintaining those facilities that have the longest life cycle. And if you remember in the presentation that David did, we had the red bar and we had the green bar down at the bottom. And so those definitely are going to be buildings that we want to maintain, but the ones in the red bar are things that we could consider. Things that are not part of this analysis that will need further evaluation, and there's a list on this third bullet item here with staffing reductions, redistricting, educational programs for specific grade groupings, looking at the neighborhood schools, transportation costs, operational costs for those buildings and taken offline. All those things need to be further evaluated as options are evaluated and considered moving forward. That is beyond the scope of what we've done at this point in the process. Potential outcomes. So one of the things that we wanted to consider is when we take buildings offline, we want to do those buildings that really require a lot of renovations just to bring them up to current standards. Renovations to maintain those facilities would be identified to remain operational. We want to keep those. Part of the options that you'll see as we go through this is looking at grade realignment. We also talked a lot in detail about other educational opportunities such as early learning centers or literacy centers, STEM programs or STEAM programs, arts and humanities. And so as we go through the options and as we explore options from here on out, those may be all things that are considered, and options can be some or all of those considerations. So looking at the planning options when we initiated this process, I'm not going to go through all of these things, but we were evaluating based on the pros and cons and some. And we looked at closing either 3 schools or 4 schools. We were looking at various grade realignments at the elementary schools. What does that mean at the secondary schools? What do we do at North Brandywine? Do we go to a 6-8 model? And as we were going through these options, we were eliminating a lot of them because we were seeing that some schools just couldn't handle it. We couldn't add on to some schools. We still had schools that were over capacity, so we just kind of trotted through all of these things, looking at various grade configurations and how we could identify what what options kind of rose to the top. And so then we took a step back, and the charts that we showed you with the capacities are just kind of a numbers game. We really needed to do an actual test model to see, based on your current programs and the capacities of each of the buildings, how these options could actually work within the context of each of the schools. So this group here and additional people from our group, as well as the administration, did some site visits in the beginning of May to verify the existing conditions at each of the select schools. And we really wanted to take a look at it to see whether or not there would need to be major renovations done, if we could just accommodate some of the things with some minor renovations and additions. And the goals that we established and the objectives that we laid out was to deactivate at least both Callan and East Fallowfield elementary schools, based on the facility evaluations and the conditions that we had encountered, as well as some of the capacity issues that we had identified. The other objective is that we wanted to build space and grow within it, and give ourselves some room to grow without disruption to the existing buildings, and trying to keep minimizing the disruption to the educational program. Another objection was trying to remove all those temporary permanent modulars off the sites. And we looked at returning the campus back to the intermediate school at grades 9 to 10 and cash at 11 to 12. So based on that, we looked at also developing some construction budgets for each of the buildings, and as an option as a whole for the facility plan. So for this first option, we were looking at closing those 2 schools, and what does that mean for the other schools? At Kings Highway, we looked at replacing the modulars that are currently on that building with permanent construction, and currently there's 4 classrooms at that building. At Reeseville, we would add 4 classrooms. What the intent here is, by closing Cal, we would redistrict 100 to 150 students from that building. At Scott, after the building walkthrough, we evaluated and determined that there wouldn't be any proposed work at that building, but there was additional capacity, so they could receive an additional 306 students from Cal and approximately the 349 students from East Fallowfield. So that gave us the support that we needed for closing those 2 buildings. At Rainbow Elementary School, we didn't propose any work for those 2 buildings. At the 6-8 building, at North Brandywine, the option that we were considering here for this particular option was to add grades 6 to 8 to that building to accommodate a true middle school building at North Brandywine. And so what that meant is doing additions and renovations to that building. And we also have another option in taking that same program and building a new building, so we can compare the costs associated between the 2. And in this particular option, we looked at returning the campus to the 9-12 configuration that it was before. And so again, this is the numbers game, but we actually looked at it from a program standpoint. And on the right-hand side, without going through all the line items, is that we've got it within the ranges that we're targeting. And the schools that are highlighted are the schools that would be impacted by doing this particular option. And so we're looking at doing work at 3 schools. And again, for the public and people on Zoom, we're not showing the plans for these options, but I'm going to walk through this with the board. So at Kings Highway, what we would plan to do is take the 4 modular classrooms that are shown on the right-hand side offline, and we would build 4 classrooms. And I want to preface the floor plans here by saying that we are not by any means showing where each of these classrooms are being located. We're just trying to get our classroom counts to where they need to be, and that would be a decision that would be done down the line. Other than the work that's proposed for the new addition, we're not proposing in this option in the cost estimates that David will present. We're not proposing any additional work at Kings Highway. At Reeseville, This is a site plan that shows some work that would need to be done to accommodate 4 additional classrooms at this building. What was identified also when we walked through the building is that there's a backup of parent drop-off onto Reeseville Road at arrivals and dismissals. So one of the things that we would want to address if we did work at Kings Highway is addressing those issues as well and rework the parking and circulation patterns. And you know, as we're talking about North Brandywine also, you know, there's going to be a redo of all the circulation patterns and parking on the site anyway. So just wanted to identify that for this particular option. In doing so, we will probably need to do some stormwater management for this site and addressing the parking and circulation, as well as some off-site improvements because we're bringing more kids to this building site. For Reeseville, programmatically, we looked at all the rooms in the building. It was determined that we need at least 2 cyber classrooms. If you are familiar with that, at North Brandywine, cyber programs are provided at that building, so we want to bring that back into the elementary school as well. And we're showing a 4 classroom addition. This plan is turned from what you saw on the site plan. We're capturing the 2 cyber classrooms close to the main entrance and what is currently the library space, and we're converting an existing classroom to another type of resource, large group instruction area, and then we're showing some additional classrooms to accommodate the program that was identified. And again, don't worry about where everything's located. That would be developed as this plan would be developed. At North Brandywine, this is the renovations and additions option. Again, looking at how do we address the parking and circulation to accommodate that building. In this renovations and additions option, we're looking at reutilizing the existing building footprint and providing an addition onto that, which would mean that we would need some additional stormwater management, parking, as well as off-site improvements for this campus. And then looking at the floor plan. So in order to get the number of classrooms required, now remember, we're at a 7th grade middle building. In this particular option, we're looking at adding 2 grades onto this building for grades 6 to 8. So what we're showing here is a 3-story addition on the top right-hand corner. And in plan, again, don't pay attention to the location of the classrooms, but all the pink areas I'm showing as your special ed classrooms. One reason I did that, you would never collect all those classrooms together, but one reason that we did that is that those are smaller size classrooms. They're just around 660, which is the minimum size classroom that you would need. And so that would be part of the planning process if we need to remove some demising walls to increase the size of those classrooms. But on the first floor, we're also showing all of our specials down in that area, our cyber classrooms in its own main entrance, STEM programs, art programs, family consumer science, business classrooms. If you notice down by the gymnasium and hatched area there is an addition of an auxiliary gym, which was thought to be required for this size of school. And over by the cafeteria, we're showing an addition that would expand the cafeteria to and the kitchen to accommodate 3 servings per grade level. Right now, the existing kitchen and cafeteria cannot accommodate this size of school. We're also adding an additional music classroom on this floor level over by the existing classrooms. And again, removing those temporary modulars. On the second floor, we're showing a number of additional classrooms on this floor level with support spaces such as toilet rooms and other support spaces for this floor level. And then we typically like to put any science classrooms on the 3rd floor so that we can vent out through the roof. And so we're showing those classrooms in the required number. And so here there's a program that was identified that needed to get put into this building, which resulted in the 3-story addition and some other additions onto the building. Now, we also wanted to look at what is the cost difference between doing all those renovations and all those additions onto North Brandywine in an occupied building, mind you. What is the cost difference between keeping that building in operation and building a new school at the former Friendship Elementary School site? And so all that work could happen, the construction could happen at that building, and once that's completed, students would move into the new facility, and the existing North Brandywine School would be demolished. But as part of that project, you would also, the other thing to just note is that we basically took that same program and put it into the new facility. So we're not adding any additional large group instruction areas or any other spaces. It's just basically an apples to apples comparison, taking it to the new facility. So in this particular case, the reason we did this is because we're minimizing the disruption to the educational program, but you're also looking at some stormwater management, parking, off-site improvements, and as part of this project. So the second option, we took this back to the committee, or to the group, and another option that we wanted to look at and test is to, what if we close 3 schools? And by that we meant deactivating not only Canton and East Fallowfield, but North Brandywine. Again, looking at removing the temporary trailers. But since the capacities were quite low at the intermediate school and the senior high school at the campus, what if we brought 6-8 to the middle school and 9-12 to the senior high school? What does that look like from a capacity standpoint? What does that look like from a planning standpoint? And develop construction budgets based on that. So that's the second option that we looked at. What that meant, same thing for grades K to 5. Same things happening at Reeseville, Kings Highway, and but what we would do is demolish North Brandywine. We would pull those grades into the intermediate school on campus and pull the 9th grade up to the senior high school on campus. And again, now we're looking at 4 buildings that are going to need some work, but we brought all the utilization factors within acceptable levels. And again, I apologize, but we're not showing these plans and site plans, which I'm going to be reviewing at the board. At the intermediate school, again, looking at pulling 6th and 7th grade into this facility. One of the things that we're limited to is just the surrounding area to expand this building. We have circulation patterns completely around the building. We are showing a possible addition in front of the athletic facility, in addition to the side of the athletic facility potentially. Same thing as what happened at North Brandywine. We're going to have to increase the size of the cafeteria. The kitchen was right size, but the cafeteria needed to be expanded. We're going to need to deal with increased parking on the site, and we're going to need to do address the circulation patterns because we're bringing more kids to this campus overall, which is going to probably result in some off-site improvements. Athletic facilities are also going to need to be a consideration, and busing. In plan, what we're showing here is an addition on the front of the school. That was the available real estate that we had to work with. And this is actually a 3-story addition, 4 classroom spaces, as well as an addition, a smaller addition for athletic support spaces. And again, like we had shown at North Brandywine, we're kind of showing all the specials on this lower level here. We have the auditorium, which is existing. We're showing some STEM spaces. We're looking at our STEM and workshop, wood workshop, family consumer science, music programs, art programs. And then we're starting to account for all the additional classroom spaces that are needed to accommodate the program. We are showing some cyber classrooms at this main entrance here so that we can, they can come in and out of the building throughout the day. On the next floor level, again, we're showing that 2nd floor of additions, maybe a connection over the entrance to the gymnasium area to connect to the 2nd floor there. And again, disregard where all these classrooms are located. We're just trying to make sure that we have our classroom count up. And you can see that we need an addition onto the cafeteria, as said before. And then on the 3rd floor, the science classrooms, all of those are currently located on that 2nd floor, but we are adding a 3rd floor onto the addition. One of the things that we noted when we were going through the pros and cons, one of the advantages in doing so is that the students that can accelerate their education and take higher level courses can do it within the existing building footprint and navigate without going outside the building. Consolidating programs, save some money for staffing, and all programs from special ed to music can be available for grades 6 to 8. Some of the things that were noted just by the existing configuration of the school are some narrow corridors that have been problematic with just class changes, and this is it. This is maxed out in building capacity, so it doesn't leave you a whole lot of flexibility for any fluctuations in enrollment. At cash, same type of scenario here. We're looking at some possible additions around the building. And programmatically, the reason these are located around the building is because science is located next to the existing science classrooms, for instance. So again, we're looking at various modifications to add parking. Circulation will need to be addressed. We have costs in there for that, but we haven't resolved all of these issues. There will be stormwater management issues, off-site improvements, and again, the athletic fields. In plan, you can see that we're showing a 2-story addition off to the side of the building with a science addition adjacent to the existing science labs. I know it's your latest addition onto the building. On the second floor, we're showing an addition for orchestra. Right now, you only have 2 music programs. We're showing a wood shop, at 2-story addition at the science area, as well as the addition. Again, some of the same concerns in some of the existing building, in part of the existing building is just the narrow corridors. And again, you're maxed out. We have a lot of interior classrooms in the existing building, which you're using now. In the proposed plan, we're trying to attempt to try to minimize that by doing a courtyard in there to get some natural light into the classroom, but none of this is set in stone. We're just trying to get our classroom count up. With that, I'll turn it over to David into the really exciting part of the presentation.
So maybe a quick reality check. So you saw an awful lot in diagram, and you may question just about everything and everywhere that things were put. We only got into the detail to prove that things fit or didn't fit. That's all. And there are places for addition on the sites. Those are not the intentions for plans. It just showed that administration was working with our design team to come up with how much you needed at each building. So please disregard the diagrams and only look at them as if we were actually trying to fit things. One other quick comment before we get into this. I was with a couple of members of the community who were asking the question, great, but how does that affect my kid? And what we're doing is merely math equations of what fits where and how to do that and how much that might cost. None of this starts to impact how the student gets taught, how they socialize, where they go to school, big topic, and what they experience when they get there. So realize that that's a major part of this, and all that we're doing is trying to provide containers for the students. So the students are the most important part of this, but right now what we're trying to show is a place for seats. So Dr. Dunlap looks like
Dave, just 2 other points just for the community. So you saw a number of different options here tonight, and you heard those options discussed. There were many more options that this master facilities plan team went through, and our goal would be to take the task force through every one of those options so that we're not just focusing on what was presented here tonight. We will run that team through everything that the master facilities team went through so everyone can see what it looks like. And then the other piece to that is that the community task force would have access to the data that the board is seeing tonight up here on the stage that has been publicly labeled confidential. The other piece to that is having the Schrader Group and ICS, along with some of the district administrators that participated in this study to where it is right now, at any information that the task force would need to help make a decision, we could put that together for the task force going forward.
Great. Okay, so the very last part of this, because you've been listening very, very nicely and intently here. All the pieces are in place to analyze any solution that you come up with at this point. That's the reality of this. We have a whole series of estimating documents that we use regularly to establish costs, whether you like the numbers or not. It's the same thing as what Danielle just presented. When you take those numbers, plug them into a worksheet that has values in it, it becomes something. So keep in mind that at the beginning of the presentation, the engineering analysis of the facilities showed 100 million, 60 million, two very, very large numbers. So these numbers would be taken against some of those numbers. This is quite small. Some of you may not be able to see this on your sheet, but the right hand is really where the important costs are. There are two sets of additions to elementary buildings that would have to occur in any scenario that you went through here. And quite frankly, where you put these additions and which buildings you put them on is a little bit irrelevant, but this is really trying to show you what the additional capacity will cost. We go through building construction, we go through site construction, we use recent relevant projects to compare the costs against, and you come up somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.5 million at Kings Highway to do the physical construction. The next part of each of these worksheets shows all of those other things that go along with putting a building project together. These include all of the professional costs, include all of the costs such as furniture, fixtures, and equipment in those additions, technology in those additions, and everything else that goes along with that. So a project at Kings Highway could cost between $3 and $4 million. It shows $3,541,788. Well, not a reality. Again, that's the plug into the worksheet. So $3 to $4 million to add there. Doing the same math at Reeseville, there's one other piece that fits into this puzzle, and that is what Danielle brought up. When you add capacity to that site, which is the North Brandywine-Reeseville site, you will end up in a situation where you probably have to consider some highway work on Reeseville Road. That will probably come along as part of the project. So we're trying to put that number in here as a lump sum cost as well. So that's in here. Right now it shows a $2 million site allowance, which you'll actually see the construction cost for potential roadways in the North Brandywine version. And so with all the traffic improvements at that site, meaning the bus circulation and parking, that project could be a $7 to $8 million project. So then you go to the North Brandywine Middle School project, which is, Danielle had two versions. She had the addition renovation, and she had the new construction. The addition renovation, using all of the engineering analyses costs, bringing that building up to speed, and frankly, as you got into that project, you would say, this space doesn't seem to be the appropriate size for what we're doing, let's move these walls. So it's also including a lump sum allowance in there to move walls around, change configurations of spaces in the building and so on, and then to do the additions to accommodate that growth. So believe it or not, that project could be somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million for construction. And when you throw all of the other costs on, and one of the big costs that is part of this is when you redo a whole building and take it from a 50-year-old building to a brand new building, you typically outfit it with new furniture and new technology throughout. And that's a big number in here. That's a $2 million cost that goes along with that. And so that project could be as high as a $120 million project. And I guess you have to take that and analyze it against doing a new building on the Friendship site, including the cost to take the old North Brandywine building down. And if you do something like that, that adds about $13 million to the construction costs, and it adds about $15 million total to the total project costs. The advantage to a situation like that, and again, we're not recommending anything, and you haven't arrived at any conclusions, but just as a general analysis, renovating and adding to a building with students in it compared to building a new building, moving the students to that, and demolishing the old building has a different impact on students and staff and parents. So just keep that in mind as you start to evaluate these. And that puts together a total project cost for those 3 projects in order to accommodate that kind of configuration that Danielle talked about of somewhere in the neighborhood of $130 million if you did the renovation addition, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 146, so 140 to 150 million dollars if you built a new building and did the 2 elementary addition sets. And I know the numbers are astounding, but when you take those and compare those to the numbers that you saw at the beginning, that starts to bring all of this into focus to some extent. And because the team also wanted to evaluate the idea of getting grades 6 to 8 at the intermediate high school building, this starts to identify what it takes to add the spaces that the administration believes are appropriate to accommodate all those students at that building to make a 6 to 8 building. And it puts it at somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 to $60 million for a project there, which means that you have to add the spaces to the senior high school to get a 9-12 building. And to do that, you're somewhere in the neighborhood of $70 to $80 million for a project. Again, very large numbers. And when you plug those into the overall worksheet, you see that between the additions to the elementary schools and the additions to the 2 high school campus buildings to turn that into a 6-12 campus, you're in the neighborhood of $140 to $150 million. And I think, ultimately, when you do this budget summary document, what this really shows is if you're taking the buildings offline that need significant work, and you're redoing where folks move in the district, no matter where you take those quantities of students and put them, these numbers are not that far off from each other. And so you almost have to evaluate as a district what the impact is ultimately on those things that I brought up, which are what is the experience of the student, where are they going to school, and so on. And so what this is showing is those 2 options that we just talked about up at the North Brandywine campus are in the 130 to 145 range. And if you try to turn the high school campus into a 6-12 ultimately, you end up somewhere in the neighborhood of 140 to 150. So that's kind of the summary of what it costs to move the students and do the math equations to put them in different places in the district against the costs of trying to renovate quite a few of the buildings as a status quo solution. And I think I'll defer to Dr. Dunlop from this point on for the next step discussion.
Thank you, Dave. So there's some programs, as we said, that when we took a look at this information, we had really looked at our comprehensive plan and tried to really address those things in this entire master facilities plan as we looked at those buildings. We are continuing to do some strategic hiring with staff to support students, their pathways towards graduation. We've linked our curriculum for English language arts and math. We are going to be doing some other things with math in line of what we've done with ELA, with pilot programs, and also, as we get further down on this slide, where we've introduced benchmark testing to increase student achievement, that has occurred both in ELA and math. We will be looking at doing the same thing in regards to linking standards to the curriculum in the areas of social studies and science. We've incorporated data teams through the MTSS process to address individual and large group academic achievement, and we will be continuing to do that process moving forward. We've introduced Pbis through MTSS process to reduce student discipline and enhance student learning on the elementary school. This year we will be concentrating with a secondary focus on climate and culture in the MTSS process. As I said, we've introduced benchmark testing. We will continue to do that and correlate our benchmark testing as well as review the results of our statewide testing that should be coming back here this fall. We've adopted a new K-7 reading program that focuses on the 5 pillars of reading and is grounded in the science of reading. Next slide, please. We are at a point where we need to do something. We cannot wait any longer. And I know that when you look at the costs for renovating and building and say, well, we're having financial difficulty, our borrowing power is low. We need to stabilize this district financially. Some people may be asking, what are we going to do with any types of increases that we receive from the state budget? I'm only one person, but there's a decision that has to be made. And my recommendation is that we save that money. We don't spend it. We live within our means. We put that money back into our fund balance so that we no longer have a negative fund balance, but a positive fund balance. A fund balance that allows our bond rating to increase so that we can borrow in the future. That whatever recommendations come out of the community task force, we're able to then put a financial plan together to support that for this district. I'm hoping that we're able to reduce our spending this year by 3%. 3% out of our total budget is about $5.7 million. We have to, in this district, spend less than we are bringing in from our tax base. That is the only way we are going to turn the tide in this district. Now, 10% is a lofty goal, but 10% of our annual budget is $19 million. There's a lot we could do with $19 million to help our bond rating. We have to stabilize this district financially. We have to continue to provide equity across the district, including building environments and programs. Tonight, you will see that we've brought before the board our student services plan and our special education plan. Coming this November will be a developmental guidance plan, as well as an English language learners plan this November for board approval. We are also going to be bringing forward a trauma-informed approach plan. All of these plans are necessary for us to move forward into our next comprehensive plan with the state and for the district, which is due on March 30th of 2023. This October, there will be an overall curriculum plan that will not just look at English language arts and math, but it's going to incorporate science and social studies and all of the electives our children take. We need to make sure that if we are closing schools, we have attractive offerings for all our students. As I said in our letter to the parents this past weekend and earlier tonight, our numbers are changing little by little, but we need to continue to have attractive offerings that bring students back into this district. We're getting ready to launch a marketing plan. And that marketing plan is going to encompass all new developments that are coming up in the district to share with those developments and those realtors the good things about the Coatesville Area School District and the good things about the schools that those children would attend where they live. As I said earlier, I'm asking the board tonight to allow us to establish a community task force to take all this information that has been shared and worked upon and take it and have deeper conversations about the future of this district and its facilities. We have a contract with the IU. We also have the possibility of other buildings that were not mentioned tonight. Gordon. That comes back to us after the contract ends in 2026. We may elect to continue with that contract. We also have the Benner building. We have current buildings that are offline and land that we own. There might be possible future land agreements that we can procure with local townships. But we have to be cautious about that, because if and when those numbers turn, we need to be able to have a place to adjust and build schools or extend off of current schools to be able to accommodate any rising enrollment numbers. Associated with those costs that the task force is going to need to look at are potential cost savings. So this is an example of cost savings. If we were to take Callan, East Fallowfield, and North Brandywine, the 7th grade center, offline, we would save about $3 million. That's just in operating costs. Now, this next number, there is a savings, but depending upon what options the task force would choose and bring back, those options are fluid, because it will come down to what is happening exactly with those schools. But for an example here tonight, if we took those 3 schools offline, there would be almost $1 million savings just with those 6 positions. Some of those positions, and I give you examples of those that the team has looked at. We have life skills programs in both the 6th grade center and the 7th grade center. If we did a combination of a middle school, 6, 7, and 8, we would only need 1 life skills classroom. So with that, that's where those numbers come from. We've looked at nurses, we've looked at counselors, but we really would need those to be able to follow the students. Again, depending upon which option is selected, the district may need to also hire an additional assistant principal. So they need to be considered as well. Here's something else that really would help us out. Any anticipation of a savings that we could procure from students returning from charter school, this is just based off of 100 students. 100 students, if we were able to get back regular ed, would save the district $1.1 million. 100 students who are identified with needs in IDEA, almost $5 million. That's about a $6.1 million savings that the district could have. At this time, I'd like to open it up to any questions from the board for any members of our panel that have been here presenting tonight. And then, just because of this discussion, I don't know that, Mr. Finkbonner, how you want to be able to address anything from the community that are here tonight in regards to this presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Dunlap. I would like to propose that in an organized fashion, allow the board to ask any questions that they see fit, and then potentially have a Q&A with the community members that are here for a brief period of time, understanding that this is a very preliminary presentation. And again, it's a very preliminary discussion, so the in-depth opinions and concerns would probably be weighted more towards later discussions down the road. Probably through the planning process, there'll be an opportunity for most people to engage in a task force. You had mentioned the organization of a task force. But I would just float that idea out there for consideration, just to use about 15 to 20 minutes worth of a workshop to allow some Q&A. I'll open that up to my colleagues for consideration.
Well, I want to thank you for the work. It is remarkable. Next time I'm bringing my flashlight so I can take notes when we turn it off. And you gave us great options. They're very clear. They're kind of the stuff we talk about when we sit around, and now you gave us real live numbers. And I think the other thing I got from all this, they're basically lobbing the ball back in our court now, right? You're lobbing the ball. You did all the work. And now it's up to us to really do deep thinking, and because as the gentleman on the end said, it's all about moving the kids, because it's easy to figure out seats and chairs and rooms and all. You did that. It's not, I don't mean easy, but you know what I mean. It's easier than having the conversation with the kids. So thank you. I don't have any questions because it's just too deep right now to get into.
Mr. Finkbonner, I would say that just like anybody else who just saw this presentation for the first time, there are hundreds and hundreds of questions and discussions that need to be had, but I would certainly be willing to listen to anything that we have here from the audience this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. I do have two questions, if I can. I think that having been through ops and going through this process thus far, I think it's kind of a multifaceted approach to reducing our AOP footprint, your annual operating plan footprint. Like, that's one objective in this conversation. But also the other side of that fence is to maximize the utilization of our buildings, to make sure that we don't have buildings that are half full, but we're paying for the full building to operate on a regular basis. So my first question that I would have is, what would be the plan? And you mentioned, Dr. Dunlap, in a perfect world, we start to get kids back. In most of the models we saw tonight, our primary focus is on closing elementary schools. And understandably so, because we can utilize other facilities, but that would put just about every elementary school at almost full capacity. What would the plan, and in order to do this, we have to spend a substantial amount of capital in order to get it done. To either renovate North Brandywine, make modifications at the campus at the intermediate and senior high school, or a complete rebuild, new build of a middle school. So there's a heavy investment in capital in all of those plans. But one thing that we didn't talk about is what happens if we're at full capacity of an elementary school. That's another conversation of a new build, which could potentially be in the neighborhood of $50, $60, $70 million on top of what we're already discussing. So what would our mitigation strategy be in the event we ran into that? Using the methodology that I always say, hope for the best, plan for the worst. So what would our strategy be if that happened?
So again, we would need to take a look at if we reduced that, we would be at that capacity. We also need to be able to look at the trends of what is happening. If we do continue to trend downward, then just by the nature of these things that you've seen tonight, those buildings should be able to maintain those numbers if that trend decreases. If that trend increases, that's where the problem, I believe, lies, that we would have to be able to then pivot and build something into a plan to be able to then adjust in small increments to be able to accommodate those students in our facilities. That would be a great problem for us to have moving forward. So I think that, as part of this, and to really study this deeply with a community task force, we would need to build some options in there to be able to cover that very question. Our master facilities plan team actually dialogued a lot about that and looking at these different options going forward. So we would definitely need to have, as part of that plan, the ability to pivot and add on to some existing buildings right now to be able to accommodate those numbers. If those numbers were to come on too quickly, that's an even bigger problem for us that we would have to face with space. And we actually even talked about, which you didn't see here tonight, but something that we will involve the task force with, of what would it take to bring South back online to be able to make that building functional. And so that is another option for us to do, which we've discussed. Again, that wasn't shared tonight, but that's something that will be shared with the community task force as well.
Thank you. Because conversely, we looked at projected numbers that showed a decline in enrollment, and understandably so, with the exception of this past year being the outlier. We have had a reduction in enrollment year after year after year. But we also increased our enrollment by about 160 to 180 kids this past year. So in looking at a future number, one could also project that over the next 5 years, we could increase our enrollment in the district by 800 students, which if you split K to 5 and 6 through 12 in half, that's an additional 500 students that we'd have to, or 400 students, I'm sorry, we'd have to figure out where we're going to put them. So I'd like to see as we advance forward through task force committees, ad hocs, whatever the next step is from here, a very deep dive in consideration of what our expansion plan would be in the event. I think we would be covered. There weren't any utilization rates that I understand for the new construction at North Brandywine because obviously that's TBD. But so we'd probably be covered on those on the 6 to 12 front, but specifically on the K to 5, making sure that we're covered in the event that there is some bloat in our enrollment. I'd like to see that.
So something that will help not only the task force, but also help the board and the community. We are in the process of collecting data that shows exit and entry points for students leaving and coming back into the district, and trying to gather information as to why they are exiting at certain points, or even not even coming into the district in kindergarten, but where are we seeing trends with students coming back in, and where are we seeing students exit. That will also give us some information that would enable us to say, well, maybe if we're seeing trends where students are coming back into 6th and 7th grade, that's an area where we may need to concentrate to help with those enrollment numbers. So we definitely need more data for that, and we are in the process of gathering that right now.
Thank you. And last question, I promise. I don't want to monopolize the time, but my second question would be in terms of some of our options show utilization rates below 60 and below 60% at the campus buildings. Obviously, we haven't made any decisions, but are there any concerns when we're capping out functional capacity in all of our buildings with the exception of our buildings on campus, where we may be in that 50 to 60% range of functional capacity, whereas the ranges we want to hit for that secondary, I believe at the high school, is 80 to 85%. So are there concerns over underutilizing those buildings, and what options do we have of maybe considering of moving maybe our cyber program to one of those buildings? We have, I believe, 200 some odd students enrolled in our cyber program, and moving the cyber programming to one of those facilities. If you could just speak to that for a second.
Again, the committee actually talked about that and looked at different options and locations for both secondary and elementary cyber programs. In one of the plans that was discussed tonight about Reeseville, in that particular plan, that particular option, some of that extra space there in that building, we actually talked about moving the elementary cyber. But to address your question about the percentage rate of utilization on the secondary level, again, we have discussed that, and that is something that we want to be able to share with the task force, so they're prepared to be able to address that when recommendations come back to the board.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
I had some thoughts as you guys were talking. You know the old line, deja vu all over again? So we had this thing in 2017, and I was part of it, and we got all hepped up on building a school, and then it had no money, and we had to pull it away. So a thing that would be useful to me, and I'm sure to other members on the board, is a timeline for the money. Because there's got to be concurrent paths. I mean, if we're going to be doing the task force for a year, and I'm sure they'll come up, whoever's on that team will come up with something great. I'm confident in that, along with fiddling. But I'm wondering about, I'm worried about the money. And I liked your idea of saving 3%, saving another percent, and banking our money and not spending it, because I don't want to have deja vu all over again.
I agree. We have to stabilize this district financially. I know that I was not part of that plan. That was a really solid plan for Kings Highway. We didn't have the money for that school, but I think the one thing, again, I wasn't here, and maybe somebody can speak to that, but for this plan, we're actually looking at the numbers, and if you see the trend, that back then you had higher numbers with elementary, right? And that bubble was kind of moved. So this plan really takes a look, or not plan, but this presentation and the data really takes a look and encompasses the entire district, K to 12, and what that looks like going forward. So that's an important piece about this particular plan. And I'm not sure that we looked at that. I don't know if you could address that, because you were part of that back then, but I don't believe we addressed the entire district.
That was indeed focused on trying to take care of a specific element, and then the comment during that process was, we'll get to the next step and figure out what to do with the rest. And you're indeed correct. The study that you've undertaken to date is all-encompassing. It's the entire district population, so it's a very different approach. I agree.
I have one question. When you were doing your plans, did you take into consideration the 5-year plans of the outer line districts of this community and then sort of combine them to come up with your idea, come up with your suggestions as to what buildings to tear down and how much to put into different buildings? Because as I see it, Coatesville's in a transition period right now. And they're getting ready to, for the lack of a better term, move the blue collar people out and bring a whole different group of people in here. Valley Township, they're building high rent districts up there. And one of the things that's been happening is the high district people come into this community and they send their kids to charter schools and we end up paying the bill. So what I'm saying tonight is I don't want to see the taxpayers of Coatesville pay for any of these people coming in from out of town and taking advantage of us, meaning Coatesville has long been here, the taxpayers, and they've built this school district to what it is today. And with this transition coming in and the way the charter laws are written, to my understanding, is that you can move into this town, put your kid in a charter school, and the money comes out of our school district. So we're gonna put a whole lot of money into these different buildings. And if some go online, the charter schools can come in and buy some of these schools. And I would hate to see that, because that's like fattening frogs for snakes, in my opinion. And I'm hoping you'll take this into consideration too, because our taxpayers have worked hard and long to put this district to where it is. And I'd like to see it stay there, and anything we do is gonna be to their advantage, not to a bunch of people from out of town coming in here.
Mr. Brown, I agree with you. We have to attract not only the new families moving into the district, but we also have to attract students back, which is hard because they've become established over time. But as I said, there are certain pivot points that we are seeing some upticks with students coming back at certain grade levels, and we have to capitalize on that. And any money that we can bring, any of those students that we can bring back is money that comes back into the district.
Dr. Dunlap, in addition to Mr. Brown's comments, amongst the 100 things that are floating through my head right now, one of the things that pops up in any of these scenarios is we would be a school district without a school south of the city. At this point in time, if East Fallowfield would close, South Brandywine is offline, we would not have a community schools to speak of south of the city. So
Yeah,
again, just one of the many things that are floating through my head right now.
Mr. Fisher, you are correct. And again, that was also discussed. There were a number of options that were discussed that weren't presented tonight that we want to be able to take the task force. It's something that we were all deeply concerned about. And so, again, that's more data to look at, and the committee that got us to where we are right now definitely had conversations about that. We also had conversations about other opportunities for schools in the city itself. And so there's a multitude of different options, and we want to get this all out and really make a solid plan for the district moving forward.
And again, I'm well aware that those things will eventually be discussed, but that was just something that I thought I'd bring to the forefront.
one final, not a question, but an ask, because business finance and education finance are kind of two different arenas. I've come to find that out pretty quickly. I would be curious as we go through this process, similar to what Ms. Mills had mentioned, is to better understand and articulate the debt financing component of this. And while it's nice to know timeline of when we're going to do it, but there's some variables. Is it going to be a 10-year repayment loan? Like what, in that process, if it's a $140 million project and it's a 10-year debt repayment and it saves, we close 2 buildings and saves $3 million, over 10 years we're offsetting that cost by $30 million. So, you know, our actual financed amount is about $110 million. But that would be really helpful as we go through this, kind of working in parallel with one another, is there's the operational side and then also the financial component. So I look forward to, if we can include that as we go forward, that would be super helpful. Thank you. Are there any other questions from my colleagues?
I have a question, Mr. Finkbonner, to you and to the board. Do I have your blessing to put together a community task force to start this September?
I would support it 110%.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
If we could, so I think you have your answer there.
Thank you.
Dr. Dunlap. If we could, it's about 8:15. If we can spend the next 15 to 20 minutes, just some limited time to allow some of the attendees tonight to ask questions. If we could just do it in a uniform manner, one at a time. If you have any questions, feel free to come up to the podium. If we can just keep it on topic for the items that were presented today in relation to the master facilities plan. And then obviously if you have any questions afterwards, you can always email the board or Dr. Dunlap and somebody will get answers. So if anybody has a question, feel free to step up.
Proctor, and I am from Valley Township. I just have a quick statement. It's nice to get all this information, but when you're looking at this in black and white, like we are, you can't see the numbers on anything that was in red and another color. So all of that stuff, we can't really read it. So I mean, if we wanted to pass this information on, like all the numbers that was there, that was noted in red on your thing, we can't see that. It's all black on these forms. So I just want to note that.
That's noted, thank you. Dr. Dunlap, will that be posted on our website?
It's already online.
Excellent,
Yes.
thank you. So Ms. Proctor, the actual presentation in color will be currently on the website for access. You're welcome.
What's that? Yeah, it's Mr. Finkbonner. Mr. Finkbonner, it is online for board docs for the public content, but we will post that on the website tomorrow in its color version.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Dunlap.
Good evening. Did you all look at overcrowding buildings? Current overcrowding buildings? Because I've heard teachers and families talk about issues with overcrowding currently.
So the capacity portion of this presentation tries to stabilize that, and that's why you saw a fairly equal capacity percentage in each building as you looked at the solutions.
Okay.
The challenge is, the way to do that, unfortunately, is to be moving district boundaries within.
Okay.
And none of that, which is a huge issue, none of that has been discussed yet either. So again, this is just taking people and putting them in seats in a capacity format.
Okay, so when do you expect to have that conversation?
That will be taking place during the community, with the community task force, and that information will be available to that task force to be able to utilize that data in making informed decisions with a recommendation for next spring. That's a detailed process that you really have to look at overlays, where people live, and then how are those boundary lines going to change to be able to meet those capacity limits that Mr. Schrader is referring to. So the
Okay.
task force will have access to that information, then be able to look at that, to come back to the board with a plan. Again, these were just options in the work that has gathered the data to this point in time. The task force is going to take that forward.
Okay.
Ms. Shannonbell, if I could add on top of that, if you look at the, I don't have the page number, but the building capacity summary, current operating capacity, if you notice the trend in most of the options that were presented today were the elimination of East Fallowfield and Callan. East Fallowfield and Callan have the lowest functional capacity of all of our elementary schools. They're also the two elementary schools of the three that are overcrowded. So two of the three elementary schools would be, those students would be reallocated to other areas to address exactly what Mr. Schrader mentioned, and that is to evenly distribute those students so you don't have an overcrowding issue.
Okay.
The other building that has an overcrowding is North Brandywine. And as you saw in the proposal tonight, it's, one of the considerations was a complete redevelopment of that building or a new building
Okay.
to address functional capacity to ensure that you don't have 125% of your actual capacity in a building.
Okay.
Did I address that correctly? I just want to make sure I gave you some context relevant to the
Okay.
data
Thank
here.
you. Okay. And then a few more questions. Did you say you talked to students? Okay. 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 I'm not sure how you feel about that, but that might be something to consider, just because they, you know, they are experts in their world, and
Students are incredibly relevant to the conversation, but first you have to create a framework for them to be able to work within.
Okay.
So yes.
Okay. Okay. And then just to the board, I think my concern is, and this, you know, I mean, take this as as I'm sharing it. When I look at Avon Grove Charter School, I mean, they are a U.S. News and World Report top-rated schools. My concern would be, let's give students a real reason to come back here. How would it look if we had every student be proficient in our PSSA scores or above basic? And, you know, speaking of the benchmark, I think you mentioned the benchmark reading or grade. I'm sorry, I'm not thinking of the language that you use, Dr. Dunlap. But one of my students is below benchmark, and he's in the 8th grade, but he's reading on the 5th grade level. And so thanks to Ms. Jones, she's helping me try to get him up to speed level. But I think overall, we really want to focus to get our students up academically. And I'm not saying that there's something wrong with the direction you're going in. We need to be thinking about this, but we also want to give families a reason to come back to Coatesville Area School District, but we also want to be focusing on preparing our students for the 20th century. Brenda George and I talked about raising the bar, and if we can have all of our students, you know, at proficient or above basic on PSA scores, I mean, what would that look like? That would be an awesome goal. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Shannonbelly. I'll add to that just because you're absolutely right. There needs to be a focus on education, and I think a lot of the presentations thus far show that there's a heavy focus. I think the other component is that you also want your students to walk into a building that around them, it provides a conducive learning environment, you know? So while that is critically important, it's also important for a student and our staff to walk into a building and be able to centrally focus on, like, what's around me is up to par on what I need to teach these children. So I think it's finding that happy medium is really what we're trying to do here.
Sure, but a lot of our students are doing well.
I agree.
I mean, look at the student basic. I mean, Carl Young recruited him, or Carl Lewis. So for some of our students, that's working, but for so many of our students, it's not working.
Yep.
And those are the students that I tend to speak about when I come to these meetings. We want every student to maximize their academic potential. But I hear what you're saying, and I support this initiative 1,000%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a 65-year-old woman. I came to Coatesville Area School District, East Falford, when I was 8 years old. I went to South Brandywine, Then I went to Scott. This school was built in 1968. I know that because my uncle graduated. It wasn't even finished. Okay. I didn't go to the intermediate school. It's okay. But those schools have asbestos in them. North Brandywine, East Fairfield. Can't say about this school. They're run down. They're old. They need to be torn down and brought up to code like these new schools. We're in 2022. We should not be sending kids to school. When I was 8 years old, that's what? 50-something years from now? 50-something years? We should not be sending our kids to these schools. Technology has come a long way, and we don't have that in our schools. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you.
For the opportunity. I think there should be additional Q&As. I'm just going to vote for that now throughout the whole process. I have a similar question as Andy with the projected enrollments. Looking at the numbers, there was a slowdown in the trend downward, and then last year we brought students back. So I'm just curious how, and I know 1 year doesn't define a trend, so putting that into a program clearly would continue downward, but all of these assumptions are made on the trend downward. So is there a way to project that differently using the slight trend upward, and then maybe not do the entire plan out, but project that and look at the plans from that standpoint? I think maybe that would be something that the group will be looking at. Just to confirm, and I think maybe Andy confirmed this, but for the anticipated cost savings, for the building cost savings, that's $2 to $3 million, and that would be per year in operating costs. So that's not just like an initial $2 to $3 million savings. That's like every single year we can bank that, maybe. And then just the last question. Well, it's multifaceted. Considering maybe a staged approach, and I'm just kind of afraid that we would shoot ourselves in the foot, choose a path for this whole huge overhaul of the buildings in many aspects, choose that entire path, and then the trend goes the other way. And we're already committed to this entire path. Could we potentially choose one step that makes sense for both ways, or a couple of different ways, do that step, see where it's trending, do the next step, making sense depending on where we're going. And then optimally have that first step additionally be something that would potentially bring students back. So maybe like increasing a building, or even just a part of an addition to a building that would maybe bring students back, show that that trend's going, and then choose from there, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
If you give me the opportunity, I'm going to come up. I just had more questions about, I'm a visual person, so I get it when you get closer, you can't really show floor plans for safety reasons in light of things that just happened. But I just went, because I'm a person who likes to punish myself, I go to other people's school board meetings too. Don't ask me why. But when I went to Downingtown's and Westchester's, and they did show the plans. It's so hard for me to understand anything that he said during the time when there was a blank screen up there, to visualize, to try to understand it. So is it really this early in the process something we can't see?
So we've had a practice of in this district, not showing those floor plans. And we're just adhering to that. But I do know in one of the districts that you mentioned, we were just having a meeting about security last week, and that came up. And I can tell you that the Schrader Group has asked to see what we prepared tonight for the public, because they've been requested to be able to do something like that for other districts. So unfortunately, with safety, everyone's just being over cautious about it.
You don't have to show the interior layout, but you know what I mean? Even just like a very rough outline of the exterior.
Yeah, so I think, again, for the task force, they're going to have access to all
Right.
this information.
Well, then I'd love to be on the task force.
So I think you have a couple different means to be able to get there.
Oh,
So-
okay, all right.
so-
Thank you.
You bet.
I've never done this before, so I hope I don't forget what I have to say. But I'm Michelle Whiteman. Should I re-announce my whole name? And I love to hear that you guys are advertising for new neighborhoods in our district. I think that that can go a long way to shed light, you know, firsthand experiences. I remember at my church, if there was interest, but people in the community had questions, I would go and do a meet and greet. I don't know if you're allowed to do that, like soliciting or whatnot, but just I would love to hear about the marketing plan for the neighborhoods because I feel that people talk in the community and there's so much weight put on that if we get them in the door, they may not leave. But if we can't get them in the door, it's going to be hard to get them to come and try it later. So I really think that is a great strategy for everything that we talked about tonight.
So the board will be seeing a presentation on the marketing plan, which is embedded into the overall communications plan within our comprehensive plan. With that said, though, we are actually having a administrative workshop tomorrow where we are continuing to develop these flyers that are going to go to these developments where our students currently attend in those jurisdictions for schools. And we want to get those out immediately, but they are going to become part of the overall marketing plan that'll be coming back to be presented to the board in a couple months.
That's a great start. So a few things. Talking about technology, like a piece of paper can get lost in the shuffle, and like we have to include people like myself who I'm realistic. You know, is it a perfect environment? No. I'll tell you a little anecdotal story. I have a rising senior here. We went to University of Pittsburgh to go on a tour, and there was a family in the lobby of the hotel. And we got talking, and he graduated this past year from a school district in Plymouth meeting. He was the pitcher of the baseball team and talked about districts and the game and Coatesville X, and he was surprised that my children went here, the father was. And so I was talking to the pitcher, the son, and I said, you know what? I said, I graduated from Downingtown when it was one school, long time ago, and it was beautiful rivalry between Coatesville and Downingtown. And when we bought our house, which is on the school district line, mine is Coatesville, and my neighbor's is Downingtown. Love where I live, beautiful property. And I said, you know what? I said, I am making my own decisions. Each child is different. And so, of course, I was going to come to the school that I was paying taxes towards. And I believe strongly to this day that my kids are so much more prepared and well-rounded because they feel comfortable in their own skin because of the diversity and the real life environment that they have shared throughout the years. And there is opportunities if you work hard, you seek them out. And my daughter really feels strongly that she is, you know, so much better of a person and prepared for her future because she went here versus surrounding school districts. So why did I just explain that? And by the way, the picture, the senior said, that is such an interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing with me. The reason why I just explained that to you is because that is completely different than what would read on a piece of paper. So like in the, I'm calling it a clubhouse, but wherever the realtor gathering space is, like put a TV up and have us in the community talking about, you know, the area that they're moving their family to, and try to get them involved in the community so that they want to participate in it instead of, well, I like my house, but I'm gonna just live here and do everything axillary from these boundaries, from, you know, this school district. So I really think that there is something to it. The other thing is that our younger daughter was the first class of the 6th grade center at Scott. And I, you know, was like, there's pros and cons here. And, you know, I looked at it from the student's perspective, like, okay, like some 6th graders aren't ready, others need more leadership opportunities. From that perspective, wonderful. I was like, that's a big school for 6th graders. It was a wonderful experience. You guys did such a good job. I have like such praises for the administrators and like pulling that off. So then fast forward, then my daughter was the first, you know, it wasn't the first 7th grade center, but then you guys changed your minds from a 7th, 8th, and she was the first 7th grade for North. And I really don't see how you would have fit the 7th and 8th graders. So she had a great experience in 7th grade as well. She's in 8th grade, and, you know, obviously COVID did a number on everybody, but in 8th grade, it was hard for her because you go from these small pods, 6th grade center, almost the same exact setup for 7th grade, and wham, she's in this huge campus with 2 grades and no pods. So my point with that is that in all of the scenarios, I always saw it lumped 6th, 7th, and 8th. So I would just challenge the thought process of why did you truly, from a faculty student experience, go to the 6th grade center model? And is there an opportunity, or did you learn from it and it's really, you know, you don't want to go in that direction? And then the other thing the last thing I wanted to mention was I never stepped foot on this campus, or that's not true, but inside the buildings until our oldest was of the grade. And I was like, wow. I couldn't believe how nice it was and everything, because the elementary schools are falling apart. The middle school was falling apart. And so you're going to advertise to someone that bought a brand new house in a new development, and it goes to your point about your environment, your learning environment really makes a difference. And so how can you pitch how great a school district is when they're in a pristine new house and then they walk into a building that has, you know, leaks, etc. So I think they have to match in some way. And that's why I feel like it'll cost more money, but if we can build new, it might be less disruption for everybody, the faculty, the students, and it's another edge on, hey, new community in our school district, look at your new building. So I'll end there, but I'm so happy I'm in the district.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, real quick, I didn't catch your last name. What was your last name again?
Do I have to? No. Whiteman.
Miss, I don't even want to address you by your name. Mrs. Whiteman.
Yes.
First and foremost, thank you for the things that you said. More importantly, thank you for the things that you said to the parents of that young man that you had conversation with at the University of Pittsburgh. Because I'm going to tell you, that's a perception that we have fought, that I have personally fought in over 40 years in this school district. And just like Miss Jacks, I was born and raised here and went to South Brandywine and all those other schools too. But it's refreshing to hear somebody support our school district, especially to parents outside of this school district, because unfortunately, that's the perception that we have. And in addition to the young man that was the pitcher at I assume it was PW, you can tell him we have a parent of a pitcher that's sitting in this audience right now who was a pretty good pitcher here, and he turned out all right too.
You?
No, not me, not me.
No,
I was a pretty good player, but no, not me.
No. It wasn't PW, but his name, you're talking about the student or
Well,
the
no,
father?
yeah, and we've
I
gone
know,
on long
I
enough,
know.
but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to thank you
No, but I
for
think
supporting
they were
the school
both-
district, because that is the perception that's out there.
Yeah, they
Thank
were
you.
both happy for, speaking up, so to speak.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more. Thank you.
Hi, all. Teresa Walker. I appreciate you mentioning there not being a building south of Coatesville, because as a person who lives in Region 3, a Callan grad and an East Fallowfield mom, it all just feels a little weird right now. I did have two quick questions. With regard to evaluating growth, did we look at where new developments are going up? Did you speak with realtors or builders with the thought that people do like community schools or neighborhood schools, and it also helps with transportation, which has been an issue everywhere? Just if that was something that was taken into consideration when looking.
Yeah, so we're speaking for the enrollment projection person who is not here, but they were asked to evaluate all of the developments that are in process, that are out there in the planning process as well. So those are all included. And where they fell were a little bit less relevant to the overall calculations, because overall what we were looking for was the actual demographics and enrollments as a cross-section.
All right, thank you. I appreciate
I will add one thing to that. They have a little bit additional information in their analysis that does speak from school to school, but because of the high-level discussion that we're at right now, that's not relevant to our conversation.
Right, okay. And then my, just another question, and it was from a friend who was watching, with regard to turning Scott into, with one of the options, turning Scott into an elementary school. There is a severe lack of green space there. There's the park across the street, but it is across the street and a public park. So if you're housing roughly 600 elementary school kids who will desperately need somewhere to run their energy out, what maybe something to consider is what the plan would look like for that. So that's all.
Thank you very much. To my colleagues on the board, I appreciate allowing the Q&A. Very fruitful. Are there any other questions or comments from my colleagues on the presentation for the Master Facilities Plan? See none. We'll move on to agenda items.
Just want to say, David, Danny, and Phil, thank you for your presentation and working with us.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Letter A, Lancaster General Medical Group Athletic Trainer Services. Recommended action pending legal review that the Board of School Directors approve the athletic training services agreement with Lancaster General Medical Group to provide the athletic training services for students of the school district. The initial term of this agreement shall commence on the effective date and continue for a period of 5 years. Thereafter, the agreement shall automatically renew for an additional term of 1 year. The annual fee per athletic trainer is $40,000 per year for a total of $80,000. plus an overtime hourly rate of $50 as presented. Do we have a motion?
Is Mr. Roan with us now? Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Finkbonner, and members of the board, Mr. Levin has reviewed this contract. There is a marketing element listed in the contract that is being removed so that this contract would go forward. That was the existing pending issue with the legal review. So we are good to go with that contract. Before it gets signed, that portion of the contract will be removed.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Letter B, T-Mobile Project 10 Million Award. Recommended action pending legal review that the Board of School Directors approves the 1500 Hotspot Award from T-Mobile through the Project 10 Million program for 5 years at no cost to the district for 100 gigabytes of data per year, including the equipment. The district may exercise the option month to month to increase the data on each hotspot to 100 gigabytes per month for a $12 hotspot, unlimited for $15 per hotspot, or revert back to $0 per hotspot to continue utilization of the remaining allocated 100 gigabytes per year as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? See none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Letter C, Power School Family and Administrator Mobile Application. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the quote from Power School for the Family and Administrator Mobile Application for $16,883.91 for setup and professional services with an annual estimated renewal cost of $2,683.99 as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? See none, we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Letter D, adoption of Chromebook one-to-one handbook. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the adoption of the revised Chromebook one-on-one handbook, or one-to-one handbook, I'm sorry, for the 2022-2023 school year as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Dr. Dunlap, if I could ask Mr. Sobczak to step down if he can, just to field a couple questions. Thank you, Mr. Sobczak.
Absolutely.
So I do have a couple questions. My first question would be, and I'm just using from language within the one-to-one handbook, for pickup and return of devices, logistically, is there a way that we can incorporate those details into the handbook, or how will that information, if we can't, then how can that information be conveyed to families? What is our plan for communication?
So you're talking about the distribution prior to the start of school year?
Yes, specifically, yes.
Okay. So that would be more of a process that I wouldn't put in the handbook, but that would be a communication that would go out via school messenger per building, but would look similar per building.
Okay, thank you. And the biggest thing that, it goes back to technology task force days, going back a couple years. One of the biggest concerns that we brought up at that time, and probably still exists today, it's probably one of your biggest nuances, is can you walk through a little bit on what that process is for collecting those devices, and like what is that process for collection at the end of the school year, more directly?
Yeah, so this past school year is the first time we've actually collected since we distributed them, and because of that, I really wanted the technology team involved in that collection process. That's why it took a little bit longer. I believe it was about 2.5, 3 weeks. Some of the data was not captured the way we wanted to see it, and that's part of the discussion of, making sure that we have a department that we can dependently get this information from. Not just Chromebooks, there's been some other instances that we want to make sure that we are doing what we need to do in our department. Because of that, and also hearing back from families and staff of how the end of the year process went, there's not a reason that the Chromebook can't be collected just like a textbook at the end of the year. So we are going to look to rely on our teachers. I'm going to use elementary as an example. The homeroom teacher at the end of the year says, okay, we're turning in textbooks, calculators, whatever may have been handed out to start the school year. There's no reason there can't be a column for Chromebooks, chargers, and then technology can come around and collect the sheets, compare the counts on the sheets to what's collected there, and it just makes the process a lot quicker and smoother. It's also not a 3-week process. It can be the last day or determined by the building and the staff in the building.
Okay. This next one is kind of relates to teachers and collections and processes. There were a couple areas where we were relying on devices, more specifically, like a lost or stolen device. We'll start with that one. So what are our expectations in our process for, let's say, a first grader that comes into school, doesn't have their device, goes to their teacher and says, hey, I lost my device. We don't know where it's at. I talked to mom, dad, grandmom, guardian, whoever it might be. We can't find it. I don't know where it's at. Does that responsibility fall on our teachers to manage that process, fill out the proper form to get to the technology department? And if so, do we have an SOP that cites that internally? And when do we expect our teachers to complete that?
So all we're asking the teachers to do is just notify technology, and that's as simple as the email to ithelpdesk@csdschools.org automatically creates a ticket. Teacher puts information in, Johnny broke, lost the device. That way we're made aware. Historically what has happened as well is that teachers are very helpful. They want their students to have devices. They use the devices in the classroom. So they're going to do everything beyond just what we tell them to get the students a device. They walk students up to the principal. Principal is connected with us. Front office wants to help the staff. So there's not a formalized SOP that says, teacher, you're responsible for this, otherwise such and such will happen. But our teachers are very consistent about, I mean, even secretaries, everyone is involved in making sure students have a device.
As a process person, it probably would be helpful to have something formalized for the staff to follow, so that way everyone's on the same page, just as a recommendation.
Sure.
The last question I have is, I didn't see anywhere in our handbook, and I did review specifically Downingtown's, they have a cap on, like a family cap that says if you know, $50 per member of your household, but it caps it, let's say $150. So if you have 5 kids, it wouldn't be $250, it would be $150. I didn't see anything in the language within our one-to-one handbook, unless I missed it, that cited that.
Yeah, historically we did a $40 per student with $100 caps. That was 2.5 students. We have had challenges with multiple students in a household, different last names, and tracking that. Plus what we're asking now is for students to sign the handbook and pay the insurance. As a district at a 50% breakage rate and wanting to see that reduced, it's challenging to not collect as much as we can to make this initiative sustainable. So I would recommend we leave it as written in the handbook.
Okay. My position on that, just as an individual, my concern is we have a portion of our community is economically stressed. And I think that while I'm sure our district, our administration is very lenient on payment plans, I think that puts undue strain on some households to worry about, do I pay a $40 technology insurance fee, or do I run down to the store and spend $40 on groceries? So doesn't sound like much to some, but to some it is.
Yeah.
So having a cap, and I know multiple households that have 3, 4, even in some cases 5 students in this district. Putting a cap or a threshold on it, I think would be very, we'll use the term customer friendly, but it would be very community friendly. So I would encourage us to consider that. I understand your position. We have a very high breakage rate, and there's got to be a return on that investment somewhere. But I also, the other side of me says, I also don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm putting anyone in a financial hardship over something.
I agree. I'm not trying to be heartless. I understand that scenario. We had a lot of our insurance collections in the past. I would say a majority of them were actually multi-households that were capped. So there's a lot.
My last question, I promise, and this is on loaner devices. So if a family doesn't sign and return their acceptable use policy or their handbook, and they don't pay a TIF, those devices can't go home.
Right.
At the elementary level, probably easy to manage. At a secondary level, that student's not ending their day in the same classroom that they started their day. I believe at one point the discussion was around using libraries to manage that process. So are those students being dismissed from their last class 5 minutes early to go down to the library to manage that? If we have 50% breakage rate, that means we have 50% loaners out there, which, let's assume we have a 50% payment on our TIF. That's 2,000 students that have loaners that have to be turned in at the end of the day. So how do we manage that process?
So in the handbook, it says that if you have paid your insurance and signed your handbook and received a replacement device while your device is going through the repair process, that device files the same, you can carry it home.
That's fair.
Once your device comes back, we put it in the cart, notify you via email, student email, and we can let our staff know, so that way we're also tracking down students as best as possible. But that way you can come and bring your loaner back, pick up your normal device, and continue about your business. Where I hear you is that we have students that are not going to pay or not going to sign, and those are the ones that have to bring the device back. I have spoken with the team about our secondary buildings have to be covered morning and so at drop-off and dismissal, but we need to work with the administrators of what this is going to look like, because it's going to present a challenge of there are already concerns about students in the hallways. We're going to push more students in the hallways doing this, so we have to figure out what this is going to look like.
Yeah, my concern is that, let's say that homeroom teacher in 9th grade has 5 students in the classroom that have loaner devices that they can't take home. And those 5 students show up to homeroom the next day, and there's only 2 devices in that classroom for those students. Right? What's the process for that? And then that one classroom that has 20 loaner devices in that classroom on a cart, because they were returned at the end of the day, and they only need 10 of them.
Yeah, if you recall from our task force, when this was going on, we talked about the challenges at secondary level. We talked about even identifying some districts that had some sort of drop-off at the bus lanes. Challenging all around, but yeah, something to work through.
Yeah, and my questions are, like, these are assurances that I want to hear as a board member to approve a 101 handbook, because in my time on the board, the last 2.5 years, technology has gone from being on the back burner in education to being at the forefront. I graduated in 2005. I would never thought that there would be students in every classroom sitting staring at a computer learning. Things change, times change. But it also means, as an organization, it's a hefty financial investment in those Chromebooks, managing end of life, recouping, damaged devices, so on and so forth. So my questioning, just so you understand where they're driving from, is on the financial side of things and the operational side, is making sure that we're not putting any undue burden on our teachers. We're certainly not putting any undue financial stress on our community, because the devices are there to help students and help a teacher deliver their curriculum. So just wanted to give you some context on where those came from.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we close with that, I know that we're looking to approve a handbook so that we can at least get that accomplished, so that we can then have a redistribution of devices as planned in August. With that said, moving forward with a cap, what is a reasonable cap for a family?
No, I think that's a fair question. I think to Mr. Sobczak's point, during our task force, we talked about a $100 cap. That's I think Downingtown is a $150 cap, I believe. And but also believe they charge more. I think they're at $50 or $75 per device. I think it's staggered based off what they take home.
Different.
If you're asking from an opinion, Dr. Dunlap, I think $100 is more than reasonable for a household to be capped at. To Mr. Sobczak's point, that's what we had talked about originally, and that's 2.5 students.
That's where we've been historically, yeah. I'd have to go back with Lori and see what that means for our numbers.
Where's the rest of the board stand with a $100 cap?
If that's what the standard is, Dr. Dunlap, or if that's like a commonplace thing, I think that's reasonable. As long as we can offer maybe payment plan options for people who are experiencing like a hardship, not enough to, depending on what their hardship needs are. I think we should, have that $100, but also be flexible about options.
Do the numbers work with 100? I don't know if that's enough because we have such breakage and stuff.
Yeah, it's not so much the breakage rate, it's the number of households and how much we're recouping. I think
That's what I meant by recouping. Is it enough to recoup? Because we deal with the whole issue of this is not cheap stuff.
Yeah, I think it comes in just under what we're putting out for insurance, and insurance is
So
coming up
maybe
on-
125? Would that help a little more, Andy?
I didn't hear your question.
She asked,
I don't, he says,
I got numbers
if we do
running through my head,
100,
sorry.
he's worried it'll just barely cover the costs. I'm saying maybe 125 will just give us a nudge above covering insurance costs.
I don't think 125 comes out equally to a $40. It would have to be 120. 125 would be over 3 per household.
120 gives us 3, and then 140 would give us.
I mean, I
3.5.
personally, I'd rather split the difference at 100, but that's just my opinion.
I don't have a problem with the 100 hours, but for somebody who's had more experience than anybody on this board in trying to collect fees like that, I would hope that there would be some kind of payment plan provided to those, much like we used to do with
Our
parking
our
permits
principals do
and
that.
things of that nature.
Yeah.
And Mike, while I have the microphone, I think I heard you say we're going to have some talk with administrators. But once again, speaking from experience, I certainly hope you have a better plan than having students in the 2 buildings here on this campus anyway. I can only speak for where I lived. You're going to have a problem. You know, we got enough students roaming these halls. And that's one of the problems that we face. Having students have to exit classrooms to return devices, I can only hope that you're going to have some conversation with administrators and try to solidify a better plan than students leaving classrooms and taking computers to the library.
Yeah.
And again, I'm only speaking from experience.
Yeah,
Like I
our
said,
biggest
I've got more
biggest
experience
challenge.
than anybody on this board.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Our biggest challenge, as Andy mentioned, was students starting and ending the day in the same location. It's tough to get around that.
With the composition of the handbook, do we have, ad hoc's the wrong word, but did we have a group of staff members, like teachers specifically and administrators, from all levels of grading, so your elementary, your middle, and your high school, kind of be able to weigh in and say, hey, this is doable, this isn't feasible? Like, to expect this it's not something that's surmountable.
Not admin at all level. We did have the script team, which is elementary and senior high, and then community as well.
Okay. So to get back to your previous question, Dr. Dunlap, I mean, I'm a proponent of a cap for financial hardship within our community, and also it incentivizes payments when paying $200 for 5 kids and knowing that you only have to pay $100 instead of that is a significant impact. I'm a proponent of a cap. I would prefer $100, but what probably would be helpful is to understand a financial analysis of what does that number of households that would be above that cap, what would it look like? You know, like how many households do we have where there's 3 or more students in the district? And what is that dollar amount? If that dollar amount equates to $30,000, let's just throw a number out there, then we know what our cost offset needs to be, and then we can come up with a number that balances that out.
Yeah, the offset number needs to be about $25 to $27 per student.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, when's the first redistribution set to take place?
8/1.
So August 1st?
Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, so what I'm going to propose is that we come back with those numbers, and that if we are able to put a piece in about a cap and put some language in about a requirement or a payment plan options, to give some different options to community members, not that we would list what those options are, but we would allow the administration to work out those options, because that could be different for each family. That we put something in there about that, then we could move forward with this. When is the collection of this sign-off going to be? When students come back in?
As the devices are distributed.
So starting 8/1.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question that I still need to ask the administrative team, but I do know that a lot of the sign-off sheets are going to be electronic, that people can just download it, sign it off, and send it in. I have not asked that question about the capability for this yet.
So I actually spoke with during the day, and he has a ticket in with the vendor. I don't think this and the other document are going to be on the electronic signature.
Okay. So again, I know that I haven't had a conversation with the rest of the administrative team because there was some things going back and forth about many different documents that parents have to sign.
Yeah.
So I still need to be clear about that. I'm not right now. So, but we would need to bring this back by the 26th to finalize this.
For the 8-1 distribution.
Correct. Which, if the board elects to move this forward, it can still go to that agenda, but we're going to have to present that information the night of the 26th, have a discussion on it, and then the board could approve or disapprove the handbook on that night. But we do have an 8-1 deadline and we need to start communicating that out as to when these Chromebooks are going to be redistributed.
No, I would propose to align with timelines and understanding some of the nuances we talked about today do not supersede the necessity of having something concrete in place, that we continue with the process of approving this, move forward, pending board approval. And to your point, Dr. Dunlap, if we could just get another presentation later this month, and if an addendum to the handbook needs to be made at that time, then we can do so.
Great.
So that's what I would propose going forward. I would ask the rest of the ops committee, Mr. Fisher and Mr. Brown, if you have any opposition to that approach, go forward.
No, I'm fine with it, but Dr. Dunlap, I don't think you heard from every member of the board on the response to the $100 fee, so I'd like to give everybody an opportunity to weigh in on that.
I'm fine with the $100 fee.
I'm fine with it too.
I'm okay.
Thank you.
I just have one quick question. Mike, did you say that when the computers are being handed out is also when you're going to hand out the handbook and the parents are expected to read the handbook and sign it right then and there?
So we'll have it posted, and then the signature sheets can be printed, just that way we're not printing off the handbook dozens of times, but the handbook is always loaded as a tab on the Chromebooks.
Okay.
Any other questions from my colleagues? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Subject. So we had a motion and a second, so we'll call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes. Letter E, InsureTel Incorporated Service Agreement for Chromebook. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the 4-year service agreement with InsureTel Incorporated for insurance on one-to-one Chromebooks at a total cost of $635,957.04. Payment 1 is due September 1st, 2022 in the amount of $305,754, I apologize, paid to IT Savvy, plus a 4-year Centelix 360 Pro Admin and broker fee of $24,449.04 paid to InsureTel, resulting in a total cost of $330,203.04. Payment 2 is due September 1st, 2023 in the amount of $305,754 for Chrome Care paid to IT Savvy as presented. Do we have a motion?
Second.
So there's a lot of moving parts there. There's a lot to unpack in that. But Dr. Dunlap, as a point of clarity, this is a renewal of insurance go forward to cover all of our devices.
That is correct.
That's what it says in a nutshell, right?
That will cover the cost that has been increasing. That first payment is covered. We will need the budget for that second payment due on September 1st, 2023. Okay, that will have to be part of next year's budget going forward, correct? Yes.
Thank you. And I don't see it in any contract, any language that's cited. understanding that all costs for just about everything is inflating, is there a clause in our agreement that allows for reevaluation of that second payment to consider attrition and costs for the second portion of that? That may be an unfair question to ask, but just curious.
Mike, I'd have to rely on you to answer that, but I do know that we looked at different options where this company, because of those rising costs, each year our insurance costs have gone up because of the amount and types of damage. And so with the payment, the companies that we were working with were not agreeable to splitting payments. Mike was able to garner a deal to be able to do the payments cut like this so that we could afford it and cover that. So in particular to that question about rising costs, they're embedded in this?
Yeah, so this is just 4 years all in. We're locked in at this rate, so we have coverage through 4 years.
Okay. Have we done a cost analysis for some of these repairs that end up going out for insurance about staffing internally to allow for our own internal repairs for some cost savings?
Yeah, we have reports back from our insurance broker who basically works on our behalf, not the insurance. And each year we've had insurance. We have actually saved money by having insurance just in repair costs, not even staffing.
Gotcha. So in other words, it wouldn't be cost justified to, if we saw, let's say, I'll just throw a number out there, $2,000 in increases in insurance costs, it would not pay dividends to staff internally to cover those repair costs internally to offset the increases, right?
We would have to look at it.
Because that's a static cost, right? Your staffing cost is static, but your insurance costs, and we just saw a significant uptick. I remember we were talking like numbers in the 300-400s during Technology Task Force, and now we're encroaching upon 635, and probably most of that's driven from replacement devices, right?
Well,
You're high liability, right?
Yeah, quantities, we are high liability. We do have an option that because of current staffing numbers to be a self-maintainer, which means we do repairs in-house, but we'd have to have the staff available to do that, and then we get some small fee of the repairs.
Sure.
We have enough where that may be something to look at, but it's not something to tack on just onto someone's role. Insurance has been very beneficial to us. We have a good working relationship with the repair depot where if something is not insured, like Chromebook or actually a teacher device, we can actually ship it to them and they will bill us and invoice us. So it's an augmentation of our department as well.
My concern would be if there is a beneficial cost offset in doing those
It's
repairs
open,
in-house,
yeah.
we're locked in to continue with this for 4 years.
Yeah.
So we can't pivot from this for 4 years. So that's my only apprehension.
One thing about that, unlike some other repair plans, because it is true insurance, if we determine years 2 or 3, we may not get all of those broker fees off the top and that admin fees off the top, but we can actually recoup our premiums.
Okay.
Mike, just one quick thing for the board, maybe a little something different too. I mentioned earlier, Mr. Finkbonder had asked about some of the restructuring that was going on in departments that came with staff positions that we mentioned in the Education Committee meeting. Can you just share with the board what we're looking to do with and explain the level 1, level 2 type of repairs and what we're trying to do
Sure.
to help the department, and what type of cost savings, so to be, would that be for being able to do this?
Sure. So we are, our department currently has 3 level 1 PC support specialist positions under the Teamster union. One of those positions is currently open. That's because Barb Fink is actually behind me here. She moved into Christine Neff's position in the help desk, so she's now Act 93 non-cert. So we have an open Teamster position, and then I have 2 other employees that are currently staffing the other 2 positions. We want to consolidate those positions. Won't get into all salaries, but flip that into a level 2 PC technician or level 2 technician. We have 1 up at campus. We just have 2. We do have 2 staff. One's a Logic Choice employee. I moved the other one out to Rainbow, and he floats for us a little bit. But this will enable us to have another highly skilled person that is not locked into campus or trying to cover Rainbow and get the buildings when they can. That person's really going to be my floater, helping us with the secondary buildings, and just enable us to do a little bit more tech support efficiently.
Thank you. I think that explanation is helpful to the point of my question. Did we get a discount for term? So because we went with a 4-year agreement, was there a percentage taken off, like a 10%?
I didn't see a percentage
reduction?
taken off. It was just a rate lock.
Mhm.
So.
The reason why I asked that question is because there's nothing in the content that we have that cites kind of the terms of the agreement. So paying over $500,000 for insurance, while I understand the necessity of having it, we're locked in for 4 years. We can't pivot from that. Unless there's something in an agreement that we haven't received for review that says, you can terminate, but the money that you get back is only at 50% or 60%.
Yeah, there will be
right?
an insurance binder, but that won't be generated until we've PO'd.
Yeah. So my only concern would be, yes, this locks us in at a rate, but it kind of handcuffs us to consider alternative options that may be at a cost savings for the district. Is there considerations, I don't want to handcuff a process, but is there consideration to do a shorter term contract, maybe 2 years, as opposed to 4?
We're offered 3 and 4 year.
Okay.
4-year just made the most sense with how we split those payments.
So a shorter term may not give us the financial flexibility to split payments, I'm going to assume. Okay. Which is a problem. Okay. Well, that answers my questions. Sorry. Does anybody else have any questions on the insurance? Thank you, Mr. Subject.
Yeah, cancel the broker's fee.
Cancel the broker fees?
Yeah.
I'll ask, but.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and call for a vote.
Yes.
Yes. I see no informational items. Does anybody have any old business?
I have
Informational?
just a piece of information to share, because I know that there's not a list for that type of stuff during the special board meeting. And it can fall under operations, it could fall under education, it could fall under finance. We have 2 contracts that have come before us today. I'm going to review those with Mr. Pelayo, and I would like to bring those contracts back to the board at the end of the month for before and after care, child care programs. Once we have a contract worked out that we'll bring before the board on the 26th, I would like to get a message out to the community as soon as possible to let them know that we will be taking this to the board for a vote so that we do not lose any more students with parents who will really rely on that before and after care child care program.
Thank you, Dr. Dunlap. Any old business? Any new business? We do not have public comment. Our next meeting will be Tuesday. Okay.
I'll try and be fast. Oh, sorry, you're going. Okay, first I want to say, and hopefully I'm not out of line to say this, I really loved the discussion that you guys had about the TIF, not just because it was technology, and I love technology, but because we love to hear like the raw discussion that you guys are having. It was great. Thank you. So I'm excited for the distribution of devices prior to the start of the school year, where hopefully parents will be present to hear about the responsibility and the TIF and read the handbook. Wondering what those days will be, how TIFs will be collected at that point, and then it sounds like the rest of them will be distributed on the first day, which is great because the teachers can really just get started, which is different than this school year. So that's awesome. Is there a process for the teachers to follow for the distribution or whoever's going to be there to make sure that it goes smoothly? And at that time, will there be an explanation and reinforcement of the concept that these are district devices that are entrusted to the students, so they're responsible for them and will be held financially responsible for them if they break them? Just making sure we reinforce that. I know things will go quickly during those times. I want to also vote for a cap for the TIF for those
That's
families.
really for me. I have 4 kids. Thank you.
To have an option and a payment plan would be great as well. Just for the summer, the rest of the summer, I'm wondering if there's potentially an option for students, like students with an IEP or students that are trying to complete their reading initiative, to potentially get a device if necessary, to be in compliance with the IEPs. I love that there was a reading initiative over the summer. I think that's awesome. I'm just concerned that the tracking of and therefore giving out of prizes is dependent on them having a computer or an iPad at home, which not all families have. So equity in that. Can we make sure also, and I think we were talking about this, that we don't collect devices prior to the teachers being done with them at the end of the year? Statistically, still looking for numbers on repairs, counts of working devices, and monthly technology updates that were requested by the board. How long do repairs take? What are the monthly numbers, turnaround time? How many were sent in? How many do we have back? How many are missing total? Wondering what the big issues are. We know that it's the middle school boys that are breaking things. Is it because they're slamming their backpacks down? Could we potentially get cases for middle schoolers to assist with that? Is it screens? Is it keys? What's the issue? Oh, gosh, sorry. She's gonna keep going.
Jen, before you go, your question about repairs.
Yeah.
So we are working with the board to try to come up with what we're calling a data dashboard.
Okay.
And we want to be able to have that kind of information available to the public. And so your question about repairs, different levels of repairs, where are they, all that kind of stuff, we're looking to put that information out publicly. So when we start the school year, right now our administrative liaisons that are assigned to specific committees are working with the board members in those committees to be able to put this data dashboard together. And so there'll be a variety of information that is linked to the committees, that's linked to our goals and objectives in the district, that will actually give us a measure on a return on what we're trying to do. Okay. That information in regards to technology is going to be something that will become available this September for the public to be able to see on an ongoing basis. So you'll be able to kind of keep track through the year as to what's happening with devices.
I can compare numbers at 2 a.m. That sounds awesome. Thank you.
Where are we?
Great question. Okay, let's go with this one.
Seeing that we are getting more hotspots, do we have data on how many are being used and how much data is used? Is this the most efficient and affordable type of internet we can provide our families? Looking for processes on devices, especially in secondary, not going home if the handbook is not complete. Collecting.
She's going to project her voice, and it's going to sound like mine. Processes for collection of TIF handbooks, processes for loaner devices, like Andy was talking about, repair payments.
An obligation list is a step in the right direction. For accountability, we just need to make sure that we follow through with the procedures put in place. How can we ensure that retagging and re-inventory of the devices will work this time differently than others? After early collection of devices and inventory done earlier in the year, there were still a significant number of parents incorrectly told that they would be charged for devices because it wasn't turned in. Sustainability. Where do we stand overall on budget? How much money have we lost overall? I see multiple grants in the agenda today, but haven't seen overall budget numbers on sustainability of the one-to-one initiative. We are able to get all devices repaired were we able to get all devices repaired prior to the last year of insurance running out? I think that's it. Oh, wait.
That's okay. We're good.
We're good. Sorry. We'll send you an email. Sorry. Just want to make it public. Oh, yeah, I did. I sent that. She has more.
Our next meeting will be Tuesday, August 9th, 2022, and call for adjournment of the Operations Committee at 9:20 p.m.
I'd like to call to order the special school board meeting for Tuesday, July 12, 2022. Agenda item 1B, purpose of the meeting. The purpose of the meeting is to approve the bills payable and any other matters that may come before the board. Agenda item 1C, reading of the mission statement. The mission of the Coatesville Area School District, rich in diversity and committed to excellence, is to create innovative educational experiences which are funded by the taxpayers, supported by the community, delivered by dedicated teachers and administrators to ensure all students will become responsible, contributing global citizens. Agenda item 1D, advisement. By notice of the President, board members are advised that all votes shall be regarded as roll call votes. The minutes should also note that public notice was given for this meeting in accordance with Act 93 of 1998, Section 1. School board meetings shall proceed in accordance with school board policy. Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Rob Fisher.
Here.
Brandon Roan.
Mr. Rowan should be excused this evening.
Harvell Brown.
Here.
Holly Charest.
Here.
Andrew Finkbonner.
Here.
Becky Harlan.
Here.
Mary Ann Harris.
Here.
Amelia Mills.
Here.
Jennifer Schott.
She's not on.
She fell off.
She's off.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's no longer with us. Is that excused for absence for her?
She's not with us?
She fell off, they said.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, could we all stand for a moment of silence and a salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda this evening? Any additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 3A, public comment. The board has requested all persons making comments on agenda items to list their name, address, telephone number, and motion items on the sheet provided. There is a 3-minute limit per person. The board does not take action or discuss items not appearing on the agenda. The board values public comment and wishes to convey that although board members cannot discuss items that are not on the agenda, they listen carefully and appreciate and value input from the public. Lori Shannon Bailey.
Good evening. I would ask that you each vote no on the adjudication from a mitigation and equitable perspective. Consider, as was announced earlier, the student is in summer school. The student has suffered enough. Please consider the caring district, the care that each of you are as board members, and the work that the child needs to do from an emotional and mental perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shannon Bailey. Carmen Jacks.
I just want y'all to take in consideration that he's a 15-year-old kid who did something stupid, but I think that the board and the school has taken it too far. The kid that he had this altercation with, they're friends. They were friends like a week after. This has been going on too long. Now I'm tired. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Jacks. Agenda item 4A, adoption of consent agenda. Recommended motion that the Board of School Directors approves the consent agenda items. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Committee meeting action items considered routine will be enacted under one motion unless removed for separate action upon board request. The purpose of the consolidated motion is to expedite governing board action on all consent items which are not held for discussion. Items that have been held for discussion by the governing board will be enacted upon at the time the item is discussed. This evening, I would like to remove from consent agenda under Finance, number 5. Agenda item A, financial statements. Agenda item B, creation of payroll specialist position in Business Department. Agenda item C, creation of accounts payable specialist in the Business Department. Agenda item D, creation of district security officer for the Coatesville Area School District. Agenda item E, creation of climate coach positions for the Coatesville Area School District. Agenda item F, creation of an additional attendance secretary position for the Coatesville Intermediate High School. G, creation of 2 additional police officer positions for the Coatesville Area School District. H, creation of Pbis building lead. I, human resources report. And J, human resources report addendum. Under education, I would like to remove agenda items J, special education plan, agenda item K, student services plan, and agenda item L, proposed adjudication. Again, that's agenda items J, K, and L. Under operations, I would like to remove agenda item D, adoption of Chromebook one-on-one handbook. Not much left, but does anybody else have anything else to remove from consent agenda this evening? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, call for the vote, please.
Andrew Finkbonner,
Yes.
Rob Fisher,
Yes.
Becky Harlan,
Yes.
Holly Charess,
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris, Amelia Mills,
Yes.
Harvell Brown.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Mr. Finkbonner, Finance Committee.
Thank you. Letter A, financial statements. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the financial statements, bills, payables list as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? See none, we'll call for a vote.
Becky Harlan,
Abstain.
Harvell Brown,
Yes.
Amelia Mills,
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris, Rob Fisher,
Yes.
Andrew Finkbonner,
Yes.
Holly Charess.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Letter B, creation of payroll specialist position in the Business Department. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the creation of 1 payroll specialist position to support the restructuring of payroll duties within the Business Department for the Coastal Area School District as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Finkbonner, I'll just say this all at once. I pulled all of these off consent agenda because these are all creations of new positions. So I figured it warranted a roll call vote. And in your committee meeting, Dr. Dunlap did respond to that these are not additional heads being added to the administrative office. That just is a reshuffling of personnel that we have. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. We'll call for a vote, please.
Holly Charess,
Yes.
Rob Fisher,
Yes.
Harvell Brown,
Yes.
Andrew Finkbonner,
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris, Amelia Mills,
Yes.
Becky Harlan.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Letter C, creation of accounts payable specialist in the Business Department. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the creation of 1 accounts payable specialist position to support the restructuring of accounts payable duties within the Business Department for the Coatesville Area School District as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Andrew Finkbonner,
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris, Harvell Brown,
Yes.
Becky Harlan,
Yes.
Holly Charess,
Yes.
Rob Fisher,
Yes.
Amelia Mills.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Letter D, creation of District Security Officer for the Coatesville Area School District. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the creation of 1 District Security Officer position to support the security of the Coatesville Area School District as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
This is a creation of a position. This person will be coming from our current security company, and we're using the funds some of the funds left from that agreement to be able to pay for this position in the district.
Thank you. We'll call for a vote.
Mary Ann Harris. Becky Harlan.
Yes.
Amelia Mills.
Yes.
Andrew Finkbonner.
Yes.
Harvell Brown.
Yes.
Holly Charess.
Yes.
Rob Fisher.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Letter E, creation of climate coach positions for the Coatesville Area School District. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the creation of 4 to 6 climate coach positions to support the students of the Coatesville Area School District as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Dr. Dunlap, we currently have 2 climate coaches in this building, in the high school building. Are we looking to add additional climate coaches to this building, or will these new positions be in other buildings?
These positions would be in other buildings to be able to put some climate coaches at the 8-9 building and to be able to put some at the middle school, and then to give some flexibility to be able to support other buildings in the district, or if there is a need to have that flexibility to be proactive about a certain situation that we can move people around. Our chief of police, as well as our director of pupil services, will be working together to be able to state where these positions are actually going to end up.
Thank you.
We'll call for a vote.
Becky Harlan.
Yes.
Rob Fisher.
Yes.
Andrew Finkbonner.
Yes.
Harvell Brown.
Yes.
Amelia Mills.
Yes.
Holly Charess.
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Letter F, creation of an additional attendance secretary position for the Coatesville Intermediate High School. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the creation of 1 additional attendance secretary position to support the Coatesville Intermediate High School as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Amelia Mills.
Yes.
Holly Charess.
Yes.
Becky Harlan.
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris. Rob Fisher.
Yes.
Andrew Finkbonner.
Yes.
Harvell Brown.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Letter G, creation of 2 additional police officer positions for the Coatesville Area School District. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the creation of 2 additional police officer positions to support the Coatesville Area School District as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Amelia Mills.
Yes.
Holly Charess.
Yes.
Rob Fisher.
Yes.
Andrew Finkbonner.
Yes.
Becky Harlan.
Yes.
Harvell Brown.
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris. Motion approved.
Letter H, creation of Pbis building lead. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the 9 Pbis building leads to implement and oversee the Pbis program in the Coatesville Area School District. There will be 1 lead per school and will be paid through Title I funding. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote.
Harvell Brown.
Yes.
Andrew Finkbonner.
Yes.
Amelia Mills.
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris.
Yes.
Becky Harlan.
Yes.
Holly Charess.
Yes.
Rob Fisher.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Letter I, Human Resources Report. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the resignations, appointments, new positions, leave of absence, transfers, change of status, and corrections as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? See none, we'll call for a vote.
Andrew Finkbonner.
Yes.
Rob Fisher.
Yes.
Becky Harlan.
Yes.
Holly Charess.
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris. Harvell Brown.
Yes.
Amelia Mills.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Letter J, Human Resources Report Addendum. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the resignations, appointments, new positions, leave of absence, transfers, change of status, and corrections as presented. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Finkbonner, if I may, on our addendum this evening, it is with regret that the Board of Directors will accept the retirement of Teresa Teal. Teresa was a 13-year veteran of the Special Ed Department at Rainbow Elementary School. So on behalf of the board, we'd like to wish Mrs. Teal a happy, safe, and healthy retirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. We'll call for a vote.
Becky Harlan.
Yes.
Harvell Brown.
Yes.
Amelia Mills.
Yes.
Holly Charess.
Yes.
Rob Fisher.
Yes.
Andrew Finkbonner.
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris. Motion approved.
Mrs. Mills, Education Committee.
Item J, Special Education Plan. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the Special Education Plan as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Ms. Mills, again, I removed from consent agenda items J and K because I feel these warrant a full board roll call vote.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Becky Harlan.
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris. Harvell Brown.
Yes.
Holly Charest.
Yes.
Rob Fisher.
Yes.
Andrew Finkbonner.
Yes.
Amelia Mills.
Yes.
Motion approved.
K, Student Services Plan. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the Student Services Plan as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Questions or comments? Call for the vote.
Holly Charest.
Yes.
Rob Fisher.
Yes.
Andrew Finkbonner.
Yes.
Harvell Brown.
Yes.
Amelia Mills.
Yes.
Becky Harlan.
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Item L, proposed adjudication, student 1008505. Recommended action that the Board of School Directors approve the proposed student adjudication for student 1008505 as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Call for the vote.
Andrew Finkbonner.
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris. Amelia Mills.
Yes.
Harvell Brown.
No.
Becky Harlan.
Yes.
Holly Charest.
No.
Rob Fisher.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Moving on to Operations Committee, Agenda Item D, Adoption of Chromebook One-on-One Handbook. Recommended motion that the Board of Directors approve the proposed, excuse me, one second. Didn't switch over. Recommended motion that the Board of School Directors approve the adoption of the revised Chromebook One-to-One Handbook for the 2022-2023 school year as presented. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, call for the vote, please.
Andrew Finkbonner.
Yes.
Mary Ann Harris. Amelia Mills.
Yes.
Becky Harlan.
Yes.
Holly Charest.
Yes.
Harvell Brown.
Yes.
Rob Fisher.
Yes.
Motion approved.
I believe that takes care of all the removals from consent agenda this evening. Moving on to agenda item 9A, public comment. The board has requested that all persons making comments of public concern to list their name, address, telephone number, and topics on the sheet provided. There is a 3-minute time limit per person. I don't see anyone signed up, but I'll certainly entertain.
So if that's going to be a rule, I would suggest, since this is officially 2 separate meetings, that we could at least leave the one up here for the second meeting.
And
Right.
honestly, I would agree with you.
Okay.
But the board will have that discussion, and again, all I'm asking is that we follow board policy.
Yeah.
Moving forward. But
Yeah, so this,
for
but this
what
was
it's
like a
worth,
second meeting.
for what it's worth, I agree with you.
But my question was more the climate coaches. So I am not the finance guru, I'll admit that right now. But when we did the community meetings, which I know I went to all of them, I'm sorry. The thing you talked about with the climate coaches and the expense that them plus additional officers, things that you wanted, you said we were gonna have to find like $2 million. What?
995,000.
How much?
995.
1 million.
1 million.
Okay. So in the proposal tonight, for just that, there was no like financials?
No, what tonight was, I'm sorry. What tonight was for is because these are positions for the district, they have to be approved to create the position for us to be able to hire. Our next steps are to be able to then go forward and hire these. Do we have $1 million right off the top that we can use? No. But we do have some funds that we can start to piecemeal this together.
Okay.
Okay, but in order for us to be able to take that step, the board would have to vote on creating these positions. Those climate coach positions, they are not part of the Lincoln Center. They would become
In-house.
Coatesville Area School District employees.
Right.
So we have to have that approval before we can even move forward.
Right, I just would, I mean, from a board perspective, like, if I was asked to vote, I would kind of want to know how much these people would cost me, you know, so that was just a piece that I didn't see in an enclosure, and there was a lot of enclosure, so I literally could have missed it. I don't know if it was there or not.
No, when we come back, we'll be able to address those
Be
costs.
more specific, like a range
Yeah, we're
of-
just getting the
And then we've
positions approved.
decided, because it's like 4 to 6, it's non-specific, like, we decided on 4, we decided on 6.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Segrest, could I just have you sign this, please? Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 11A. At this time, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion. Second.
We will adjourn at 9:41.
George just sent you and I an email.
She said no.
The super, yes. Nope.
Yeah, I talked to him.
I don't know